So I think we're a little after 1 o'clock, so we'll get started today. So thank you everyone for being here at GeoIgnite, specifically within our Open Geospatial Consortium or OGC Canada Forum session. So my name is Ryan Ahola. I'm a scientist with Natural Resources Canada, the Canada Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Canada Forum. So today I just wanted to give you just a quick introduction to the forum itself, as well as the session that we'll have today, and then we'll get right into the topics. So first, we wanted to acknowledge our Indigenous the territories that we're located on today. So today we're present on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The government of Canada, of course, acknowledges the historical oppressions of lands, cultures, and the original peoples in what we now know as Canada. And we are certainly committed to reconciliation efforts to renew a relationship with Indigenous peoples based on recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. And so we would certainly welcome you to consider more about learning more about the Indigenous lands on the territories where either you are today or wherever you're joining us from. And there are various resources in the slide that can help with that. So a bit of background on the Canada Forum itself. OGC, or the Open Geospatial Consortium, has this concept of regional forums, which are really ways in which groups or individuals from different mostly geographical areas can interact and to have various discussions about geospatial concepts. So we run this forum for Canada, which helps to advocate for different interests, Canadian interests within the consortium itself. If there's different topics within OGC, we can help to advance those within Canada. And it provides a really good platform to have various types of geospatial discussions that are facing Canada in an open forum and also a neutral forum. And we're also aiming to communicate various activities that are happening across geospatial sectors in Canada. So that's part of the purpose of the session today. This started back in 2017. We had a bit of delay with the pandemic, and we're starting to have more engagement through sessions, including last June in Montreal, October in Calgary, and we also had a session virtually in March. So just to quickly name the co-chairs of this group. So Rosie Chen from OGC is one of the lead chairs from the consortium side, and she's done a lot of excellent work getting this up and running. Andy Hogarth from CARIS, the Teledyne Geospatial. Aurelian Constantinescu, from CAE. Bradford Dean, who's a GIS manager at the Mohawk Council of Ganawage. Paul Churcher from Department of National Defense, also John Hale from DND, and myself. So just a quick overview of the agenda that we'll cover today. We actually have a fairly in-depth agenda to get through. Peter Rabley, the CEO from OGC, will give some quick remarks shortly. And then we're going to get into a panel discussion, which will look at this concept of a pan-Canadian geospatial strategy that is something that NRCan is interested in advancing. So we're going to have some various perspectives on ideas for that and how to move forward. We will have a presentation from CCMEO around GEO.ca and how OGC standards are being used within that system. Then we'll move to our last panel discussion, which is going to be on building information modeling and GIS convergence. That will actually build on a similar discussion that happened during the Calgary Canada Forum session last year. So we're building on that. Then we will have a presentation about the Mirror Committee for ISO Technical Committee 211. So a little bit of information about what that is and how you can get involved. And then I'll wrap it up with some closing remarks at the very end. So that's our plan for today. So we might as well get right into it. So I would like to invite Peter Rabley, the CEO from OGC, to deliver a few opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, Eric, and NRCan for your continued support of the OGC forums. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. First time in Ottawa. I hope I get a chance to walk around and see the tulips tomorrow. I've been told I should definitely do that. I'm not going to speak for too long because I know you want to get into the material of the forum. But maybe just a few words of reflection. As you probably can tell, And like Will Cadell, I come from the same set of islands that Will does. I'm English. I've moved to the US, where I married a Jamaican and have raised 3 kids. And in the last 3 to 4 months, as a family and with friends, we've reflected on what it means to be someone who's come to the US and live in the US with all the changes. And we've had very interesting discussions and dialogue in our community. Many of my neighbors are involved with the federal agencies, some of whom have lost their jobs or decided to take the so-called fork in the road. So these are certainly, as I think a Chinese proverb goes, interesting times. And what I reflected on was how important, as we've had all these discussions and we have disagreements with neighbors and friends and others, is how important a sense of community and friends are. And it's very easy to get caught up and go in different directions and be angry and worry about things ultimately we can't change in many ways. And so this forum, this gathering, this community that this group represents becomes even more important to me as the CEO of OGC, having been in the position for a year. And we want to continue to say, let's keep these communities going. Let's have more vibrant discussions and dialogue, differences of opinions, and come together in these spaces, trusted space, neutral space. I think I heard Ryan refer to it. They're important more than ever because we can solve problems regardless of a lot of the other problems that are around us if we work together and share ideas. So thank you again for coming to the forum. Thank you for giving your time and expertise. And thank you for sharing and listening to each other. And ultimately with the idea of trying to solve problems together. So I trust that everyone has a successful day today, as well as GeoIgnite over the next 2 days as well. So thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me. And thank you again to NRCan.
Great. Thank you, Peter, very much for those excellent remarks. So now we'll move in towards the towards the collaborative Pan-Canadian Geospatial Strategy panel discussion. So I'd like to invite all of the panelists to come up and sit here at the front, and we'll get going. And we will be having polling that is running during this session. So I'm not sure if it's possible to share the screen that will be showing that. I think you can just sit anywhere. I'm just wondering do I have to do anything from this computer to change the screens around, or is that managed from the back? Okay, well that's visible now. So yeah, if you so while we're getting set up, we will be doing live polling. So if you'd like to join the poll, you can. Aside from that, I will pass the floor to our moderator, Eric Loubier, to get us going.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ryan. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. And thanks to our panelists for accepting to participate in this discussion. So my name is Eric Loubier. I'm the Director General for the Canadian Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation at NRCan. And as Ryan pointed out, I'll be moderating this session. So we're all aware that geospatial has taken a more and more important space and role in our activities and throughout society as well. The demand for information, for system, for technology is growing by the day. And here in Canada, we have, I think we can agree, a very long history of success using innovation and geospatial. And that has led us to a more diverse geospatial environment, ecosystem, forming what we know the Canadian Geospatial Data Infrastructure, or for short, CGDI. While this has kind of served us very well, the CGDI, over the years, I think now there's, as always, a need to evolve it, to remain at the leading edge of technology and approaches. We've seen this environment change quite a bit, if it's in terms of data streams, of new technology, and it's evolving faster and faster, as I said. Also, a very more diverse number of stakeholders, users, data providers. There used to be only a handful of people involved, or departments or organization involved 24, 25 or 30 years ago in geospatial. Now we can see those technologies really now embedded in a number of departments, decision-making bodies, non-traditional users. Creates a very diverse ecosystem, which all lobbies for a time to reflect on how to create a more inclusive, collaborative environment. And we felt it was time to consult and define a path forward to a new Canadian geospatial strategy. And we did that. We first consulted. First step was to consult the community, this broader ecosystem, and we have now data, or at least results, on this consultation that we want to leverage to create such a new strategy, Canadian strategy for our CGDI. So this is what it's all about today. This panel, we want to reach out, discuss how best to establish the strategy based on the preliminary result that we have. So we want to know our panelists' point of view, but also your point of view through the survey, the poll that you can actually access through the QR code on the screen. And we'll have some curated questions for the panelists, and you'll be invited to contribute as well through this technology. So now, I think we could put on throughout the session, panelists will be responding to question, you as well. And to prime that, we'll go right into to the first questions. And we can put on the screen, I think there's a slide that actually shows the our priorities. So as I said, we reached out to a number of communities and stakeholders in the Canadian geospatial environment, and gathered this information. This is preliminary. We haven't yet gone through the entire input that we've received. However, we've identified some priorities already during this consultation exercise, and you have some of them. You have them in the on the screen, and we would like to ask the panelists a first question. First, respondents have highlighted the importance of standards, of policy and legal framework for geospatial, approaches to certified trusted platforms and service providers. They've also identified challenges or in terms of funding, recognition of Indigenous considerations. You have them there on the screen. So panelists, we're interested in hearing your perspective on these priorities. So what we first ask you is, within a few minutes, 2 minutes, please, one, introduce yourself, your name, title, a little bit of a bio, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, and ask and respond to this following question. According to you, which are the three priorities most relevant to your organization or sectors or area of work? And what would you hope a collaborative geospatial strategy could do for your organization, or what it would look like? And audience, you can go into the poll and do the same thing. We'll ask the panelists to, let's go by order here, or maybe we can go on the screen on the online participants, Mr. Sarandon.
Yes, hello. Can you all hear me okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, yeah, my name is James Serendip. I'm the environmental GIS specialist for the Kahnawake Yakwaduhunt Sanutna Zia Yadunkwa, or KIPO, the Kahnawake Environment Protection Office. I'm standing in today actually for Bradford Dean, who is the GIS manager for the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake, and so I will endeavor to fill his shoes here today. Though I am not a member of the community of Kahnawake, and I myself am not Indigenous. So I'm going to do my best here today to speak from my experience with the community of Kahnawake and also with the other 13 First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities that are, along with Kahnawake, participants in the Enhanced Maritime Situational Awareness Program through Transport Canada. That if I have the opportunity to speak to it all, I think represents a really successful venture in collaborative GIS between the federal government of Canada and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. So I'm just very excited to be a part of this panel today. I think relative to the other panelists, I'm a somewhat of a newcomer in the realm of GIS, but I look forward to giving the perspectives that I have to offer here today. So about which are the top 3 priorities most relevant to my sector. You know, it's actually wonderful to see what the work that you guys have already done at the OGC, and I absolutely agree with the priorities that have been identified. I think from my experience with the community of Kahnawake, the top 3 priorities would be data access and also interactivity, being able to both access data relevant to us and our community, and then also being able to share data from our community to other outside parties. Certainly a big one that you guys have identified is capacity and capacity building. And this is so relevant for Kahnawake and I think for a lot of the First Nations communities that are working in high-level GIS right now. And then, of course, the big one always for First Nations communities is data sovereignty and how can we integrate the OCAP principles with a larger collaborative approach. And so, you know, what I'm really hoping that can come out of this meeting and this organization and this particular focus is ways to address particularly that and ways to really foster greater collaboration and interoperability between First Nations, Métis, and Inuit GIS and GIS bodies at the larger federal and provincial levels.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, let's go in order then, Gordon.
I'll push it hard. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm Gordon Plunkett. I'm with Esri Canada. I'm the Director of Spatial Infrastructure, and I'm not Alex Miller, as you may have guessed. He's still recovering from a skiing injury. So he's had a few health problems related to that. And with regards to the question that was asked this morning of where you started, and I didn't start in geospatial. I started out in electrical engineering and moved into this field. So I'm a little different. Also, I was in the public sector. I worked in the federal government for many years. And I worked in, say, defense, remote sensing, natural resources, and agriculture. And now I'm with Esri Canada, of course, in the private sector. And I'm involved with standards. So I'm the member of the OGC for Esri Canada and do a lot of work lately in public safety with the Next Generation 911 coming around, transportation, maritime infrastructure, and the community map of Canada, which Shane mentioned earlier this morning. And in terms of the 3 priorities that I discussed with Alex, number 1 is number 1, which is the role of the national governance. And I think it's really there needs to be some certainty in terms of how the data sharing in Canada is going to work. And I think that would a strategy would certainly help there. Since I am now in the private sector, number 2 is in the next most important. As you know, the private sector is coin operated. So if there's any money, then the industry will get involved. We're not so much in the government or my friends here in academia. And then the final one is number 10, which is foster the collaboration and potentially redoing the Canadian Geomatics Accord. I mean, I was involved with the 2 tranches of that have come around, and I think it's very helpful because it's like in the US where people say, well, we need some, what are you doing here? And if you don't have any kind of document that you can point to. Here's the plan, here's the strategy, here's where we're going. That's why it's really critical, I think, for both everybody, but particularly the private sector, to know what the strategy is and where we can put our funding and our investments to make sure that we're aligned with what's going on in the community and what NRCan are proposing.
Thank you, Gordon.
That's
Uh,
that.
Dr. Lurio.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm in the School of Journalism and Communication at Carleton University, but all my degrees are in GIS, geomatics, and spatial data infrastructures. And I find myself in that space because I would be considered one of the founders of a field called critical data studies, which is essentially the application of social theory to understanding the datafied society. The kinds of research projects that someone like me works on are open smart cities, and you'll meet Peck, who's roaming around here as a student from McGill, who's worked on that project with me and others. I have the good fortune of working with the Carleton Immersive Media Studios Lab on their Imagining Canada's Digital Twin project, but also on projects like I Trust AI based out of UBC, which is the application of artificial intelligence in the world of data preservation. And in that environment, I bring in the case studies of how do we preserve digital twins and how do we preserve those data in the long term. And I would be considered one of the founders in Canada of open data back in the early days where we were parlaying licenses and making data open. When I think of the strategy, what I think of it is as an infrastructure. So one of the things that the definitions that we have of critical data studies is that data are never separate from the tools, the instruments, the institutions, the organizations, and the people and the environments and the context within which they are created. So a context needs to occur for these data to actually exist. And when I think of that, I think of an inclusive infrastructure. I think of one that is sovereign in the same way that James talked about sovereignty, but sovereign in the way that we were discussing it this morning. I think of it as material and technical, political, and social. But I also think of open specifications, open standards, interoperability. And when I think of interoperability, I think of interoperability between provinces and territories, but also the local communities, whether they be First Nation, Métis, Inuit communities, and or municipalities. I also think across sectors. So I think the problems that we have ahead of us are cross-sectoral. And if I'm to invoke someone very special to me who's passed away that many of you know, my academic advisor was Professor Fraser Taylor. And he would always say to us that the reason that we do the work that we do is to solve problems. And if we are going to have 500,000 new houses per year for the next 10 years, can a data strategy, a geospatial data strategy, and can an infrastructure help us actually build those houses, build the capacity to do so, manage the forestry supply chains, the electricity supply chains, the concrete supply chains, the transportation issues that we're going to have to actually do that, and actually start thinking of solving these problems in an innovative and long-term sustainable way. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To you, Chris.
Thank you. My name is Chris Hemingway. I'm the Director of Marine Spatial Data Services and Licensing with the Canadian Hydrographic Service, which is a part of the science sector of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. When thinking about the top 3 priorities most relevant for my organization, honestly, you could almost take a dart and blindfold it and shoot it. They're all very good, but I did adhere to the rules and I picked 3. For me, I think number 1, having the framework, the strategy provides an overarching framework for a lot of the other actions or priorities that were listed. Priority 2, I think having centralized funding, not everything needs funding. There's a lot that can be done without it. There's a lot of, cooperation and in-kind kind of things that can be done, but funding does help with some things because as we know with data, the reality is there's infrastructure, there's software, there's other things that need to be done, and building interoperable systems require funding. And then priority 5, and the reason for that is within the Canadian Hydrographic Service, we create nautical charts, which are legally required to be carried by vessels over a certain size. So a lot of our work and data falls within somewhat of a legal framework. So it has me thinking of that naturally. But I think when I look at some of the work we do around trying to promote open data and making our own data open, we're straddling a line between protecting things from the legal and privacy and ethics point of view versus the open side of things. And then the other thing is that in making data open, it's often a coalition of the willing, because there's not a lot of what's the word, compliance that's required. There's nobody really checking. And so having harmonized legal policy frameworks could help with some of that, I think. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So now let's see what the poll showed. Now we have a technical problem here is with my eyes,
I
actually.
was gonna say, you want my glasses? Cause I'm having a hard time seeing.
Maybe Gordon,
Tiny font.
Gordon, I would suggest, if you mind, we could switch seats. So next time around, I will actually be able to read what's on the screen. Oops. Sorry about that. So we've got fairly diverse results, but obviously enhancing collaboration being at the top. We also have technology and innovation, and then a slew of other ones, such as improving communication, standards, funding, obviously, as always, and ease discovery of information as well. And it's still changing. Okay, thank you. So now we've got some, oops, I should be turning that way a little more now. So now we've got some specific curated question for each of the panelists. So I'll start with you again, Mr. Serendip. Canada does not have a governance process that recognizes Indigenous needs and consideration in a pan-Canadian geospatial activity. So in your experience as a GIS specialist and working with communities, what governance models could facilitate Indigenous sovereignty and co-leadership?
Yeah, so thank you. It's nice that that's just a easy to address question. I want to start too by acknowledging that I'm coming to you today from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And, I think this is a really important question because especially just seeing the poll results, we got a whopping 4% at the recognition of Indigenous needs there. So, this is an uphill fight for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities to have inclusion in geospatial strategies at a level that actually is functional for the needs of those communities. It does appear that what we need is some kind of a federated approach. And, I really can speak only to sort of, data governance models. I don't know if the question is meant to be governance at a larger level, but in terms of data governance, and I think it applies to, to legal frameworks as well, a federated approach where there is a centralized authority that can help to steer things forward in a cohesive manner is extremely important. It can't be just uniquely centralized because this is just never going to fly and be applicable to the extreme levels of diversities that we see throughout First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. But if we keep those communities in isolation, they're all very siloed, and a lot of these communities have tremendous data capacity and a lot of GIS activity taking place, and it's very, very important and instrumental for those communities. It certainly is for Kahnawake. We use GIS data on a daily basis from, not just the environmental work that we're doing, which is extensive. We're looking right now at, a regional assessment throughout the entire St. Lawrence area, and Kahnawake is taking a lead on this initiative. but we also reference a lot of data from our friends there at NRCan through our lands department, and just things like everyday transference of properties in our infrastructure that we often, a lot of places in the community don't even have specific addresses. And so when it comes to things like emergency response and emergency management, GIS is really critical for our community. So we use a ton of data, but the problem is the data that we use, we have a particular understanding of what's available to us and what we function from. If we speak to another community, even another Mohawk community, say our neighbors in Aguasasne or something, they have a completely different set of data that they access and that they use. And oftentimes we find when we actually sit down and get into real nuts and bolts discussions with some of our neighboring communities, they have access to data we didn't even know about and would be really instrumental for us, and vice versa. So we need to address the fact that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities are often extremely siloed, extremely isolated, not just one from each other data-wise and understanding of GIS functionality-wise, but we're also kind of in this place of isolation and separation from resources at the larger levels, certainly provincially, and to some degree, through the federal government as well. So what I see as what can really facilitate true Indigenous sovereignty and co-leadership is a federated approach, but that allows for a fair degree of granularity. And I do want to again mention, the Enhanced Maritime Situational Awareness Initiative, which was kind of spearheaded by Transport Canada. It's part of the Oceans Protections Plan. This has been extremely successful for the 14 First Nations communities that have been involved in this program. And I think the reason it's been so successful for those communities is because they were brought in right from the very start. They were brought in at the initial planning and inception phase, and it was co-designed from the very beginning with the representatives of those communities, rather than bringing a solution to a community and saying, look, here's a solution for you, here's some ways you can use it. Because it can be really easy to misunderstand or not comprehend what the actual needs of some of these communities may be. And so the fact that we were able to do that also helped to establish trust. And this is really key for a federated solution to really allow for Indigenous sovereignty and co-leadership. There has to be a level of personal trust. It has to be on an individual basis and through an individual context. As Dr. L'Oreal was talking, the context is so critical, especially I think for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, because again, they're often understandably really reluctant to expose or potentially expose their data, right? So if we're going to look at ways to preserve OCAP through a federated approach, it requires the establishment of trust through individuals. So I think having a greater involvement in organizations like this and greater outreach to those communities through individuals on an individual basis is what's going to lead us to a federated approach that really can provide that sense of sovereignty and co-leadership within Indigenous communities as well.
Thank you very much. Now let's see what the audience to contribute. So collaborative decision-making process, obviously, an Indigenous-led governance structure, which aligns well with what you just said. Thank you.
Good job, audience.
Okay, so the next question is for Mr. Plunkett. So our consultation results show that Canada is quite good at completing short-term project-focused geospatial initiatives, partnership, but they're often disconnected from long-term vision. So what specific incentive can drive long-term partnership alignment with a Pan-Canadian geospatial strategy, particularly in the private sector?
Okay, thanks, Eric. So in terms of just speaking on from the private sector perspective, I did mention this earlier, but financial is certainly one of them. If there's a contract, the private sector will be at your door. So that's certainly one that is the major stimulant, if you want to call it that, for the private sector. But there's a lot of others. For example, the access to data and infrastructure. This James mentioned this about the federated approach to it, and that's great. That's certainly a good way to implement what we're calling the CGDI. And the Halifax, well, actually all the climate folks have put together this federated hub of environmental information, and Halifax is one of the exemplars. The Halifax Climate Hub is an exemplar in that area. And they have things like, well, certain projects that they work on together. They have leaders who are running different areas of it. They have statistics on how much data is being used and how it's being used to some extent. They have ambassadors. I don't know whether we have ambassadors for us for some of our activities, but certainly in environmental area, that's one of the things that they use to promote it. They have stories, story maps, that kind of thing. Partners, and they use social media, LinkedIn and Facebook. So, there's lots of ways of getting the word out. You just have to have somebody who's responsible for getting that out. And James mentioned this a little bit, but in terms, and I mentioned also that I'm involved with public safety a lot these days, and the one regulatory requirement that's coming up is the requirement for GIS data in next generation 911. So when you make a 911 call pretty soon, in the background, there will be a GIS data set that's actually being used. Right now, they just use addresses with text with your civic address. And James also mentioned that in some areas there is no address. So that's a problem. But that's one way so that will be coming up, the requirement for GIS data. I think Chris mentioned that his area is another area where there are regulatory requirements for having maps. But in terms of on land, there's very few. But certainly NG911 is going to, I think, shake up the community and get people ready for sharing some of this data. Capacity building, I think that's been talked about quite a bit. There's lots of capacity and training, to expand the use of the CGI and to do academic and industrial research. PPPs may be a way of doing some collaborative research, collaborative opportunities on projects. And then, of course, the final one is business development opportunities. If there is a business opportunity, the private sector will be there to look to help out and access the data infrastructure and create innovative new applications that can then be sold, say, in other areas or whatever, to keep things growing and innovating as we go. So those are mine, Eric.
Thank you. Okay, now let's see what we got from the audience. So we've got market value reselling. We need conversation on both sides of designing the partnership, info sharing, collaborative data work, funded mapping. Obviously, funding has always been one of the challenges. Provide meaningful projects where geospatial tool can be used to solve real problem. Again, ability funding for Canadian companies to solve critical business needs for a government, key long-term relationship and business development opportunities. Funding comes again. Maybe a relook of the Canadian Geomatics Accord, which is also in the works. Okay, so we'll take stock of that team. And okay, next question is for you, Dr. Lario. So roundtable participants indicated that improved geospatial literacy and workforce education is key to ensuring Canada's future geospatial readiness. So what action can a strategy recommend to build geospatial literacy and help Canadians better appreciate geospatial?
Thank you. Great question. So the people that I see about 500 young people a year. So it's quite a few. None of them are in GIS and geomatics. So it's very interesting as a sample of people. Who do I see? I see data science students. I see data science and artificial intelligence students. I see computer scientists. I see software engineers. I see communications and journalism students. I see criminology students. I see digital humanities. In all cases, They have quite a bit of technological capacity. So building up the technological capacity to do geospatial type of work is not that difficult for most of them. What they don't have is the critical thinking about, well, what are good data? What are data of good provenance? What are data that are authoritative? How do I actually spatially narrate this story in a way that the domain specialists actually understand it? And, you know, not to speak out of turn for the data science students, they love solving problems. They don't often critically think about domain specialists in the world that they're in. Neither do computer scientists or software engineers. They're used to solving, you know, mathematical and algorithmic problems. And so we need to elevate the critical thinking about spatial awareness as well as spatial data. But the other thing is, then there's a whole swath for the communication students that don't have a lot of that technical capacity. And I start introducing this at the second year, third year, fourth year, and at the graduate level, is they need to understand, are the data good? Do the data have veracity? Are they accurate and reliable? Do they have good provenance? Even when we go, and again, I'm going to get in trouble here, if they go to any open data portal, except for at the city, you don't really know the context of the data, where they come from. So they always have to go back to the producing institution of those data sets to understand the context and to read the gray literature and the reports that are associated with those data. But more importantly, they need to see data that have been integrated that can tell a story of some kind. So we have lots of data. You know, we have the Federal Geographic Data Platform, which, you know, it's laudatory, and we have the Arctic Spatial Data Infrastructure. But what we don't have is a way to integrate those data in a way that they are comprehensible and understood by the public, so that journalists can use them, because right now the journalists are not using the data. We have a tremendous amount of data, but journalists are not using them. And it's very difficult to use data from multiple sources to actually solve problems such as a housing problem or a sustainability problem. So I think it's more the critical thinking piece. In some cases, for those who aren't technical, an integrative piece where they can see the story and access the story. And then for the very technologically capable who aren't the geo people, it is really to teach them the critical thinking and to respect the domain expertise that comes to the table, that you can't just bring hydrographic, forestry, and so on together without thinking about the socioeconomic as well. And then finally, and I think it was mentioned this morning, social sciences and criminology. I work with Ottawa Police Services a lot, and I take students to the 911 Communication Control Center all the time. And we do a whole overview of how those kinds of data work. And then we discuss other questions, not only of the data, but also what are the surveillance capabilities of smart cities, digital twins, and some of the more critical reflections on how we buy and sell data, even in this country. If we start thinking of data brokerage companies, for example, who in a sense do open pit mining of our open data to sometimes survey us in not the best ways that we would like that to happen. So how do we think through those larger political and economic situations when it comes to developing literacy about data in general, about geo, and about the great infrastructure that we have? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So from the audience, we've got things around more demonstrative tutorials about geomatics and GIS, more geographic data with socioeconomic layers, education starting earlier in school, emphasize on spatial thinking and understanding authoritative data set. This is essentially what you told us. High school program as well, support geomatics in their request for program funding, university, and promote cross-cutting programs for a recent graduate, provide non-degree geomatics training for practitioners in many fields. Okay, thanks a lot, audience, for that. And now to you, Mr. Hemingway. Consultation participants indicated that Canada lacks a consolidated inventory of foundational data sets, and discoverability is hindered by inconsistent metadata siloed across departments and government. So, given your experience with integration of hydrographic data, what do you feel can be done to improve management and use of geospatial data? What compliance mechanisms should accompany Canada's geospatial metadata and data sharing standards?
So since we are at an OGC forum here, I think I'm going to lead off with standards. I think one of the things that helps with the integration of data, and I'll speak from the hydrographic perspective here. When we're putting nautical charts together, we're using a lot of standards that come from the International Hydrographic Organization. They set standards for things like the display colors, some of the data that gets integrated. And the reason for that is that charts need to look the same the world over. So whether you're using a chart from, Nigeria or China or Canada, they need to look the same. The data that comes into our charts isn't always standardized. Whether we're integrating cable and pipeline data, aquaculture sites, other potential hazards to navigation, some of that data, and even from other government agencies for traffic separation schemes and stuff like that, there's not necessarily, it's not coming in a clear standard. So having data standards, generally speaking, and speaking more broadly than just hydrographic here, but data standards help with that interoperability piece. And attached to that is the metadata standards. Having consistent metadata standards helps with the discoverability. Speaking to something that Dr. Lariat raised, that open data access is important, and you raised the point, there's lots of open data out there. Often the issue is what to do with it, how do you interpret it? And I think some of my colleagues, or many of my colleagues in government, are also reaching that conclusion. And there's been a lot of discussion about the need to develop knowledge products with some of this data, that just providing the data may not be good enough. You may need to think beyond that and start to look at what are the knowledge products that you could develop that actually provide some interpretation of that data into a more digestible format. So I think that's a couple of options. The other thing is that we need supporting infrastructure, because a lot of the data that we're generating, broadly speaking, especially nowadays, is large data. It's coming at us quicker than ever, and there's more and more data being collected every day because the sensors, the ability for citizens and everyone to go out and collect data is growing every day. Sensors are coming down in price. So having the supporting infrastructure and processes to be able to take this data in, quality control it, integrate it is really critical. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there. And then one of the areas that still you might think today is like well understood and well defined is that land-water interface, and having a better way of integrating the two data streams from coming from the land to the water and vice versa. And work has begun. There are things like continuous vertical datum that have been developed. But when you talk about a lot of other standards like the cadastral side of things on land versus what's in the water, two different realms. So I think there's potentially a lot of work there to be done that would help. And then taking advantage of advanced tech like cloud technology, GIS, artificial intelligence. We all know the power of AI. I almost hesitate to say this because almost as soon as you say something, it's out of date. But I think AI is still a thing. But the use of AI can really accelerate some of these things, whether it's quality controlling data, analyzing data, as we know. So making use of these things and making them broadly available is helpful. In terms of compliance mechanisms, which you also mentioned, I think in my intro I mentioned there are things like policies and guidelines that directives, mandatory use of standards that we do have in some cases, which are helpful, but they're often left in the federal government where I work, to departmental level to implement or to enforce. And unless you're publishing to the open government platform, in which case they won't let you publish unless you meet certain criteria, or to the federal geospatial platform, or geospatial, I'm not sure what it's called these days, the GEO.ca, you are required to meet certain standards. But beyond that, it's often left to departmental level. So having some better compliance mechanisms would help. There's ways of doing it at a technical level. You can use, like for machine-to-machine data sharing, for example. You can have technical compliance checks for things like data encoding and exchange, system interoperability, metadata tagging, and feature representation. Just sort of that first level pass, making sure things have been coded, entered properly. And then, the big one would be legislating some of these things. So introducing legislation that requires certain things to be done. And I think I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Let's now go to the poll. So we've got certification programs. coming on top, and regular audits and penalties for non-compliance. Okay, thanks. Thanks to the audience. Now we'll go to a second round of question. We'll start with you, Mr. Plunkett. So some of the recommendation from the round tables that we've done includes the establishment of a Pan-Canadian Innovation Coordinator Hub or Secretariat funding program with collaborative requirements and commercialization incentives. So how can Canada incentivize domestic innovation while ensuring open access and ethical data governance? And specifically, our open access principle, particularly for government-held data, helpful or harmful to driving Canadian geospatial innovation, according to you?
Yeah, very good question. I think that's something that Canada has not been really good at lately, is doing innovation. I know back in my days at CCRS, that was everything we did. Because there wasn't anything. You couldn't buy it, you had to make it. So I think innovation programs or innovation support would be very useful. I know we've worked on a couple of these OGC pilot projects, and they're not much money, you don't make much money on them, but it does give you a really good indication of where the areas, let's put it this, areas that need improvement. And you work with other companies and, find out, because normally, if we have a data set and you have to interchange them, and using some of the OGC standards, most of the time they work, but occasionally they don't. And quite often it takes a fair amount of investigation on the technical side of things to figure out why they don't actually exchange data properly. And we've run into, a lot of different issues that way. I mean, it could be one thing, but if you don't try it, you're never going to find that out. And if you really want to use it, if there's an emergency or something, you would like to be able to work interoperably with a lot of other organizations and technology. The open data initiatives have really been helpful as well, because they do make the data open and usable and accessible. The problem is quite often the findable, the F in the fair data principle. I see a few people nodding their head, but yeah, that's, and one of the reasons is there is some difference in the standards, especially for metadata standards within Canada. And I think that has to be fixed. I mean, if you go to an international registry or catalog of metadata, often you can't find Canadian data simply because the standard is just needs a little bit of tweaking. So that's really, something that, if you can't find it in the first place, you don't even know it exists. So I think, but open data principles, I think, are really, really great. One thing you see in the literature, which I haven't really run into, is everybody talks about the ethical data governance. And data governance, yeah, but I'm not sure why they always throw in the ethical. I'm not sure if anybody's had any experience with unethical data. I think that'd be great to see, but personally, I haven't really run into that. So I'm not sure why the ethical is on there, but certainly data governance is a big issue that needs to be looked at. And then I think there were some discussions this morning about, the applications, the privacy, security, transparency, those kind of things. But one thing that's not accounted for in there is accountability. So if you put up a bad data set, people know it's a bad data set, but how do you actually get the organization to fix it? That's kind of missing in the open data policies as they are. But as I mentioned, that Halifax hub, they kind of internally manage all the governance, and they make sure that the data is good. I mean, we've talked about capacity building as well and education. I think that's, that's a given that has to be done. And I know in the old days, they used to use the open data sites to send the students for their projects to open data sites and get some data and use it in their GIS program or project. And that worked out very well. And now there's lots of places where they can go and get this kind of data. And then incentivizing data and innovation. So I think, if you look at say the Community Map of Canada, there's a lot of people contribute their data, but some of them bring it in willingly. Others, like it's like you've seen this, there's the early adopters and then there's the laggards. And you want to get in the middle where there's most of the people, but how do you incentivize people to actually provide their data? I think that's something, and it's hard to get it out of the private sector because they want to get money for it, so they don't make it public. But certainly governments have a lot of data, and how do you get governments, and not just the federal government? I mean, there's lots of smaller governments too that, maybe their council or their council or mayor or whatever, their councillors don't see the advantage of it. But I think people in this room, I think you guys have a bit of a job to do there to try and push your MPP or your councillor or whatever in whatever municipality you're in to make their data open. Ottawa's obviously open place, but there's a lot that aren't. Hundreds or thousands of municipalities that aren't. The provinces are pretty good. Anyway, I think those are some of the ideas that we can push on that, Eric. Thanks.
Thank you, Gordon. Okay, let's see. Are open access principle harmful or harmful? So we have neither harmful or neither harmful. So people are interesting response. But I don't know. Oh no, it's just the meter isn't the meter. People are like more plutôt more somewhat. So yeah, they're more leaning towards somewhat helpful and very helpful. We just have one vote actually that's somewhat harmful. So we'll move to the next question. So this one is for you, Chris. Consultation pointed to uncertainties about who does what in Canada's geospatial ecosystem regarding data collection, maintenance, and dissemination. We live in a totally different world where there's way more stakeholders than there was before. Sometimes you're a producer, sometimes you're a user, sometimes you're disseminating. How can we federate governance in that context to support alignment without centralization?
So I gave this a bit of thought. I have a few ideas. First off, to me, a federated governance model is one that respects the autonomy of the different jurisdictions, whether it's federal, provincial, to territorial, municipal, Indigenous, or others, municipal, sorry, I mentioned municipal, and while still promoting collaboration. And so to do that, I think you need to have shared principles, not shared control necessarily, by establishing common standards and protocols. They can be technical, like metadata, data formats, privacy, etc., that all the jurisdictions agree to follow. You can use memoranda of understanding, for example, to define roles and responsibilities for specific situations without imposing a top-down control. Having interoperable infrastructure by developing shared platforms, based data hubs, etc., that allow the data to be accessed and used across jurisdictions, ensuring systems are interoperable, but also enabling each partner to maintain their own data sovereignty. Having co-governance bodies is another way to do this, where you have multi-jurisdictional steering committees or councils that include representatives from all levels of government and Indigenous communities. And I think lastly, which is something I've heard a few times, is the incentives. Again, money. So having incentives that offer funding, technical support, or capacity building to encourage the participation in national initiatives and recognize and reward the best practices in data sharing and collaboration. And I don't know that I know we do recognize best practices, but I don't know if we do enough of it. And I'll give you an example. Because Gordon raised it and said, like often the private sector hangs on to their data because they want to get money out of it, right? And that makes sense. You're not running a business for charity most of the time. But I'll give you an example of a company that did, and their best practice has encouraged other companies to do similar things. And that was like many years ago. Some of you might have heard of the Seabed 2030 initiative, where GEBCO and the Nippon Foundation, that's the General Bathymetric Charts of the Oceans, and the Nippon Foundation partnered. Nippon Foundation provided funding with the goal of trying to chart the oceans and seabed by 2030. And one company decided to start donating their transit data. So they're a survey company, Fugro. Many of you probably know them. And when they transited from one work location to another, they would just turn on their multi-beam system, and it would be at their transiting speed, not at normal surveying speed. So the data quality is not as good and not QC'd to the same level, but they're turning it on, and then they just make that contribution to seabed 2030. And I can't count the number of conferences or meetings that I went to where people were talking nonstop about Fugro. So you want to talk about getting money. Maybe they didn't get money directly for that data, but I'm sure they sure got contracts because the name was everywhere, right? So I think there's other ways, maybe creative ways that companies can think about making their data available that maybe doesn't get a direct benefit, but maybe there's indirect benefits. So I think some of this takes a bit of creative thinking about, think outside the box about how we make our data available, what you do with it, how can you create value out of it in other ways than just direct payment. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. So let's see. So coming on top, we've got enhanced communication and collaboration platform, followed by establish clear roles and responsibilities and promote intergovernmental agreements. So strong support behind communication and collaboration platforms. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to, on Chris's comment there, we do have the community map of Canada, and we provide that free. The problem is getting the data from the other people that to make the map. That's the issue. That's the challenge.
Okay, our next question is for you, Dr. Lario. Trust surfaced as a vital component in consultation results, especially in relation to data ownership, sharing, intellectual property. Participant noted that success of partnership and communication strategy hinge on transparency, respect for sovereignty, and responsible data use. So what would you suggest are some of the solutions? Can communication play a role in improving trust in geospatial?
I won't speak too much about communication, but in terms of trust, one of the big issues is what is an authoritative data set? In the era of mis and disinformation, which my colleagues in the School of Communication and Media Studies are very busy looking at, it's very difficult to actually know what is an authoritative source. Unless you're an expert, it is really difficult to distinguish those things. So one is we're going to have to start, particularly in the context of Gen AI, and we're getting answers without the sources of the data and without the supporting documentation of the data. And this is not an insignificant problem. You may not be seeing it, but I see it on the day-to-day. So what I would love to see more so, particularly with all of the open data at all levels of government, not just the metadata, but the supporting documentation that come with those data and the provenance. Who are the authorities of those data sets? Where do you go to understand those data sets? Why were those data sets produced in the first place? And how ought we deal with those data sets? But to me, that comes back to issues of governance, right? We talk about governance, but how are we going to govern this particular changing environment? How are we going to legislate this particular kind of environment? We teased that out a little bit this morning. And where's the leadership in that particular environment? It's one thing to have a strategy, but who's going to take the lead to say, these are our principles, to bring up what you were saying, and these are how we're going to procure and we're going to adhere to these principles. And this is how we're going to have some kind of certification or authoritative stamp on these data to let people know that they are trusted, whether they come from crowdsourced sources or not, right? Or they come from government sources. So I think that part is really, really fundamental and important because it's really absolutely changing times indeed. One of the other things that comes with that is, have we forgotten the principles that we already had? You know, I always go back to the technology vision and implementation plan of the CGDI back in 2012, where there are a set of very clear principles. And quite frankly, they're still the best principles. I still have yet to find a set of principles that are better than those 12. And I think your organization was very actively involved in helping set up those types of principles. I think we need to go back to that. And I think also we need to understand, I'll step back. I'll go back to something that both James and Chris said. These intersecting spaces, or I call them ecotones, or the edges in between biodiversity spaces or between disciplines and so on, where we're working with each other. I think there needs to be a lot more of that when it comes to governance. And I don't think, I don't think that it should just stay at NRCan. I think to govern this space, it needs to be broader. We actually need to go back and bring back transportation, environment, NRCan, social services, goodness forbid that we bring them in, StatsCan, and that we start thinking of an authoritative, well-governed, interoperable, multi-sector, multi-jurisdiction way of standardizing these data and making these data integratable and accessible to the public. And we've often stayed, and I say we, the global we, but departments have stayed in their lanes, and that's been great, particularly with, platinum standards types of data sets, but it means that we're missing the social element of Canadian society in a lot of the data that we're producing. And one last couple of comments, I'm working, because I get to work, have the good fortune of working with the Carleton Immersive Media Studio, and I'm listening to the AECOO sector, and I feel, wow, how so 2004 is the conversation in terms of a lack of interoperability between BIM and geospatial, but also the openness aspect of the early days of the infrastructure is absent from the conversation, except for some of the standards that you're coming up with at the OGC. So how do we begin to bring new sectors who are not accustomed to, 400 years of cartography? Sorry about the colonial aspects there, James. The 400 years of cartography and geography that we've done in Canada, this sector is new to that space. And it's almost as if we need to bring that conversation to that sector. So along with governance and legislation and regulation and standards and interoperability, some power to convene these groups together, to bring them on board with the conversations we've been having since 2003, 2004, 2005, and then bring those principles back in and start, I think, what you're suggesting with co-governance of these different sectors at the table, trying to find a way to integrate more the work that we're doing. Because I think we're missing out on that integrative piece. And if we're going to solve sustainability and climate calamity, there's no way we can do that without coming back together, which is fundamentally what we do as geographers. We bring in human interaction with the environment. I think it's time, when we start governing our data sets and our organizations and our infrastructures, that we bring that back. And I think it's reinforcing a lot of the things that my colleagues here have already said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great comment. And don't apologize. I totally agree with you.
Okay.
In that sense, it's just more and more challenging as
Yes.
administrative process and funding mechanisms drive
course.
us in the opposite direction.
course.
Yeah.
Of course, it takes time to do that work.
Okay, let's see what we've got from the audience. Standards and principles in common, visibility and traceability and validity, collaboration and shared ownership. Re-promote the principles from 2012. Collaborative, a national mapping agency, clarity on source of authoritative data sets and standards for industry, clear licensing, authoritative source, curated data sets, what happened there? Okay, lots of, anyway, we'll take stock of all of that with the team, and thank you very much for the feedback, audience.
It's a tabernouche list.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly. So, so the last question of the segments goes to you, James. Consultation participants indicated that Indigenous partners require knowledge products and real-time data matched to needs, such as a land use planning, capacity building, recognition of sovereignty and data governance. However, Indigenous organization, communities, and practitioners face technology barriers of all sorts, from technology to human resources, capacity building, and so forth and so on. So how can small municipalities and indigenous communities be better resourced to address their priorities?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Eric. I had prepared a short answer in case we found ourselves running short on time, which is ask them. But in lieu of that trite response, I do want to elaborate a little bit. I think whatever I'm going to offer here, it's important to put it in the framework of a nothing about us without us approach. And this is a challenge. It's a challenge not just for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, but also for small municipalities, just because there is so much out there and there's so much diversity in these communities. How can we actually effectively reach all of them? I think a large piece of that would be really encouraging participation in geospatial organizations and agencies. The things that GeoIgnite is doing, organizations like GoSpatial, the more that these communities are involved in those types of organizations and the meetings that they hold, then the more they'll be aware of and able to access some of the resources that are available. That said, I think that some of the suggestions from the other panelists here would be really key in this as well. I particularly want to mention a couple of things that Mr. Hemingway said. I think the providing of actual knowledge products in addition to just data sources would really, really help. Especially in communities that already have a fairly limited capacity, it's increasingly challenging to, not just to access data, but then to understand it, to know how to utilize it. And so, yeah, I think providing knowledge products, and especially in an integrated way, in the way that Dr. Laurie is proposing, we can perhaps form these knowledge products not just from a specific viewpoint or a specific data source, such as something that's just environmental, something that's just resource related, something that's just land use related, but also involving social services, also, involving environmental health. There's a lot of ways that this can, I think, fairly easily by larger and particularly federal government or in a federated capacity, that these data can be brought together into knowledge products that are a lot more accessible for smaller communities that lack the capacity, especially in terms of training, staffing, and understanding of the tools available. Also, interoperable infrastructure is going to be really critical. Not just specific pieces of infrastructure, because there too, it's often very easy to assume what infrastructure is needed in a community and miss what they actually need. And a lot of times it's not just about, say, having enough, broadband capacity. It really is about the interoperability of their entire GIS approach. And I think that also really ties to, again, what a few of the panelists have mentioned about the need for metadata standards. And that may sound like, well, what do metadata standards have to do with building capacity in small communities? But really, that's one of those key little pieces that without that really accessible and common understanding of the metadata, again, we run into this problem of what is authoritative. This is something that I encounter on a daily basis just in my environmental work with Ganawage. What is an environmental authoritative source? And I think that question is getting increasingly difficult to answer. And so there too, especially when you're looking at small communities with limited capacity, I don't necessarily have the time to go digging through and looking to identify and consult with experts that can really help me to determine what is an authoritative data source. But so there too, I think if we have really quality metadata standards that are easily understood and translatable throughout these smaller municipalities and First Nations communities, then we can address that at least a little bit, and that can help us with the capacity that we have to make the most use of what's already available.
Thank you very much. So here again as well, we've got lots of answers back from the audience. Thanks again. Providing simplified low-cost solutions, training, more funding to encourage participation, citizen participation again, funding for and partnership with private sector and government, access to foundational data infrastructure, free and easy access to resources for geo-management, proactive engagement, access to best practices, need capacity training, national funding support, and some more. So thanks again, audience, for the wealth of your answers. And yes, yeah, go ahead.
So essentially, all of that list and what James said is what we need to do to build up knowledge capacity and literacy in the country overall. I think that list says it, and what you just said, James, also says it. It's the same for First Nation, Métis, Inuit, and it's the same for everybody else, I think.
Okay, now in the next segment, I'll ask a common question and ask you to take turns, or who wants to contribute to that question. So how do you get to a collaborative geospatial strategy for Canada? What specific action can your organization or sector take to support the development and implementation of such a strategy? So maybe we'll start with you first, Dr. Lareau,
Right.
or
No, I'm
if
good.
anyone, you're good?
Oh,
Thanks.
Thank you. I was just thinking of, what is a common mutually beneficial problem that we could all work on from the different sectors, the different levels of government, the different levels of capacity. And as we're working on the resolution of that problem, it could be, the 500,000 new houses for the next 10 years. It could be climate change. It could be a whole bunch of things in between. But what could be one problem that we could use as a case to identify the key bottlenecks we have in terms of governance, in terms of legislation, in terms of collaboration, in terms of co-governance, that we can resolve through that? Because if we can't come together to solve these big problems and identify what the issues are in terms of data sharing, data collaboration, integration, interoperability, specifications, and standards, to do that, then I think we're in very big trouble. So I think I'd love to see leadership on that governance piece and leadership on the identification of a problem that we can all gain from, private sector and public sector inclusive. And I think the comment this morning on shared values is, I think, one that can get us going on that particular project. So that's what I'd love to see. And a convener, we need a convener. Thank you.
Any other comments on that question, participants?
Just to add a little bit to what was said, I think they're having a common sort of project or something, but also the common vision, having that common vision that's been established not just by one entity, but collectively, right? So you co-create this national, the national strategy, national vision that reflects the priorities of all those that are at the table. And then, as you mentioned, you align it with some of those broader goals, whether it's, infrastructure development, climate resilience, et cetera, digital transformation. And then I think going forward, it's an iterative process, but you need to have, again, I know I said this before, but have those inclusive governance structures that keep that going beyond just an initial sort of, let's establish a vision and develop a strategy, but then throughout the life cycle, you've got to keep those sort of inclusive bodies going.
Gordon?
I just have one question. It was mentioned about, I think Tracy mentioned it, about having the governments, like the different sectors in the government get together, different departments basically getting together. Is that group still running the IACG or with the federal?
Not called that way, but we've recently over the last year brought back a conversation, especially on the development of a pan-Canadian strategy. We brought back the conversation amongst the various departments. But in this case, what's a little different, and you alluded to that, is that there are geospatial data production activities or programs in each of those departments, which was not necessarily the case when IACG was there. It was more a relationship of, a data provider and the user departments, or a few data providers and the user departments. Now it's more an ecosystem where each one of them and is one either at times, as I said before, a producer and a provider, which I think provide a more interesting environment, or more promising environment for a collaborative strategy where you are at times a producer, at times a user. And however, the challenge remains that funding in government has shifted a little bit to really program driven, which is good because it's targeted at solving specific problems. You get money to solve this problem, and there's going to be money in housing. You said you're just going to be there was money in climate change, and there still is, right? In emergency management, but the money's targeted at that. So the challenge we have is each of those initiatives tend to produce data for themselves in that very specific context, and sometimes have a portal of their own to distribute that data. So how do we bring these various pieces together? And they're way more diverse than they ever were.
Yeah, well, that's certainly something, because the feds could provide leadership in that area of how to bring these organizations together. Sure, thanks.
Any other perspective, maybe James or again, any other panelists?
Yeah, well, I just want to share that I think Dr. L'Oreal's approach of using a specific issue or a specific vision to cohere collaboration around is an absolutely fantastic idea. And, I think that I personally have witnessed this in the realm of marine safety, that around the EMSA initiative, we're able to see a really diverse group come together and collaborate in very effective ways. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of lead into another concept that we're going to talk about, which is buy-in. And nothing will generate buy-in better than seeing a specific success of a collaborative effort. And so when you look at, a program like EMSA, where we, got Arctic communities that were able to have not only a whole set of GNSS devices, but a GIS system to monitor them, and all of a sudden their search and rescue calls went from 25 or more a year, unfortunately sometimes resulting in loss of life, to 0 a year, literally overnight. That's a success of GIS in a community that's very, very tangible, and that creates a lot of buy-in and a lot of desire for collaboration. And so I think there's got to be a lot of these specific issues that in various ways will be faced by a lot of communities, and also relevant to the private sector and relevant to larger governments as well, that we can really cohere collaboration around effectively.
Okay. So we're almost at the end of this session. Thanks everybody online for your contributions. So maybe one more questions for all the panelists, as if there's one thing you would like the audience to take away from this session, keep it short. We still have maybe 4 or 5 minutes left. If you said there's one thing that I'd like them to go home with, amongst all the things that I said or that were said today, what would that be? Maybe Gord.
Yeah, well, I guess there's a couple of things. Thanks, Eric. There's a couple of things that I think would be useful. One would be to reinvigorate the CCOG. I think it is still operating, but nobody knows what's going on in there, and that's certainly the way of the data getting down from the top, if you want to call it, out into the open area. And there's probably, and I know there's lots of stuff going on in CCOG. That's the Canadian Council on Geomatics, for those who aren't aware. That's where all the federal governments and the territorial governments get together with the federal government to coordinate these kind of activities in Canada. And I think it's really important to, get that thing going, and especially to get the news out of what they're doing. And just one more quick thing is that there may be opportunities for Next Generation 911 to bring the community more together, because every community in Canada has to do NG 911. So that, CCOG is bringing data down. These guys are going to be bringing the data up. And so I think there's potentially great opportunities there for Canada to really get on the high horse here to get rolling on this. Thanks.
James, maybe?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think the thing I would like people most to take away is that, accessibility is really key, that we can have all the best data in the world, but if the people who need it can't access it, don't know how to access it, unable to access it because of their capacity, then it essentially doesn't exist for them. And that along with accessibility, what's required as part of accessibility is trust in the source of the data, trust in the veracity of the data. And so as many of the panelists addressed this issue, I think that by implementing really reliable standards, we can improve the trust aspect of accessibility. But that also is a personal thing that requires individuals to be participants in organizations and meetings such as this. But accessibility through trust and verity of data.
Thank you. James, maybe?
So my answer to this would be that I think, that saying, it takes a village. Like if this was easy and any one person or one group, one level of government could do it, it would have been done. And we wouldn't be having this discussion. And so these things are really difficult. They're very challenging to do. It's very easy for each and every one of us to leave here, go home, get our heads buried back in our day-to-day work, putting out fires here and there, and get siloed again. And I think we really do need to bridge some of those gaps. Federal government to municipalities is a big gap because we don't have direct connections, but building the linkages, building the communities around maybe, as was suggested, themes or priorities is a way to maybe help bridge some of those gaps. And keeping in mind as we go back that how easy it is to sort of get back in our routines, but get back and think about, how do I in my day-to-day role, how can I engage? How can I contribute to this in a more meaningful way? Because we're not going to get there if we don't do something a little bit different.
Thank you. Tracy.
So, we had COVID, things didn't go so well with data. We have a climate issue, things are not going so well with data. We have a sovereignty issue. Things are not really going so great either. And we're realizing that we were des somnambules, like zombies a little bit at the wheel and not really taking leadership of things. So what I would love to see is a sovereign, accessible, interoperable, open standards, open specifications infrastructure that is co-governed with all levels of government and First Nation, Métis, Inuit communities, that is trustworthy, but that is not only for government and not only for private sector, that it is actually for all of us, and that somehow within that we can find a way to make it mutually beneficial so that we can solve some of the big problems we have coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these wise remarks. And all of this is going to be quite helpful in our journey to establish a pan-Canadian geospatial strategy renewal using the input we've got from all the consultation exercise we've done, roundtables, but also from what we've heard today. Here you have a key if you want to receive updates about where we're at and contribute some more. Please scan the QR code that's here on the screen, and we'll connect with you, and you'll be informed of what's happening on that front. So that being said, thank you very much to OGC for convening us today. Thanks to all of you guys for participating into the session, and most of all, thanks to all of our panelists. Thank you, James, Tracy, Chris, Gordon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Hey, excellent. Thank you so much, panelists and everyone for participating in the panel discussion. So now we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is going to be a presentation from Bo Lu, who's one of my colleagues at Natural Resources Canada. He's going to be talking about how geospatial discovery is being enhanced in the GEO.ca platform through OGC standards. So with that, I'll pass it to Bo.
Okay, should I get started? All right. Okay, so thanks for the introduction, Ryan. I work as a program advisor for Natural Resources Canada, CCMEO. First, I want to welcome OGC for having me, and also GeoIgnite. I'm actually a back-end engineer, so it's kind of refreshing to be in front of every one of you today. I'm usually in the shadows. Okay, this isn't quite working. Okay, so here's the agenda today. I'll go through who we are, where our role is in open data publishing. Then I'll go through geo.ca, how we're using standards. I'll show you visually how we're disseminating data. So I have a really nice diagram showing how metadata is being published across government. And I'll finish with how we're using OGC standards and the challenges and opportunities that we have. So again, I have a computer science background. I like to work on data infrastructures. I first started in around 2015. I worked with the Canadian Wildland Fire Information Systems out in Alberta. So that publishes the fire danger maps across Canada out to 15 days. I was involved in the cloud lift and shift, and also maintaining as a system administrator. So I've seen quite a bit. I was involved in the Fort McMurray wildfire, so it was a bit of trial by fire at the time. All right. Currently, I work in both the federal geospatial platform, so that's running on a software called GeoNetwork, and also the Geo.ca front end, which is front end of CCMEO. This slide is an illustration of CCMEO. We have 5 divisions. My division is GeoDiscovery. We have corporate, of course. We have GeoBase. We have CGDI, which Ryan is here, and CCRS. And I won't go through the acronyms, unfortunately. All right, so I won't read off the slide today, but it has our vision, our mission, and it goes along quite a bit with our panelists here. The vision and the mission is very much aligned with what they've talked about. And our goal with open government, open data, open geospatial is to make it accessible for Canadians. Our role in government. So this is a timeline of where we are and also the past. So in 2013, the Open Government Initiative started making us open, making our data open, making it transparent, avoid duplication within government when we're publishing metadata, and also to support innovation. And about 2015, 2016, the FGP came online. I was an employee at NRCan. I thought this was a really cool product. It looked really great. I didn't know that in 4 years, I would be kind of the back-end engineer on it. So woe is me. Yeah. Yeah. And between 2013 and now, FGP is still here. It's still alive. It's now a product line of GeoDiscovery within our division, but it's still using the same infrastructure, using the same standards, and using kind of the same publication workflow. During that time, we've also incorporated provincial and territorial data through partnerships. And then I think in 2020, around 2021, I think we have every single province and territory. Okay, and today, Geo.ca, where are we? We're actually launching a new search and discovery tool. It's using OpenSearch, so it's cloud-based. It's using large language models and fine-tuning that model to enhance domain-specific searches. And it's called the semantic search engine. We're also releasing dashboards, so we're able to see kind of what people are searching for, what data people are accessing, and also understanding kind of what we're missing. And finally, we're also very excited to have our OGC API records released this June. So again, OGC API records is the replacement or the next generation of the catalog services for web or CSW, which is an OGC standard. So here's a slide for Geo.ca where our data comes from. We have 41 or more contributors, federal government agencies, departments, and we also have all of the provincial and territorial. Currently, we have over 7,000 data sets in the catalog. And recently, in the past year or two, we've added Sentinel-1 data and also RCM ARD, which stands for RadarSat Constellation Mission Analysis Ready Data. And we also added value on features for that. All of this is available on the Treasury Board Open Data portal. Okay, here. So how can you use Geo.ca? This video here in the far corner there gives you a quick overview of the website and actually someone navigating through, and then it's kind of like a user flow about how they can access the data. We also have curated data themes by themes and by themes and foundational data. So themes can be flooding. So the flood hazard mapping program, that's one of our curated products we have on Geo.ca. And other things you can do, of course, you can view your data. You can view your data on a map, and you can also export, share your findings. Okay, I will skip this one, but basically how you can leverage Geo.ca. And here are some viewable data sets on Geo.ca. We also support time series data in a recent update. So you can see in here you have the radioactivity monitoring data set from Health Canada. These are additional images of Geo.ca. How it looks like. You can see that EO data sets, how that renders. We have a semantic search image in the far corner there, which shows you our new search engine compared to our old search engine. And you can see the improvements there. We also have a new AI-based similarity engine. So for every metadata record, you'll be able to see similar records. So that's using AI as in the back end. Okay, and one final thing is GeoView. So this is our replacement mapping viewer on the web for the RAMP viewer. For those of you familiar, the RAMP is the reusable accessible mapping platform, and it's a Environment Canada-led viewer. We now have a NRCan one, and we see that being used on open maps in the near future. So I already talked about GeoView. Some upcoming things coming to Geo.ca. We have a new geolocator API. So this is a wrapper API that is in front of various other geolocation APIs. So it incorporates multiple geolocation services. One is the Geographic Names Boards of Canada, GEO.ca. One is from the OpenStreetMaps or NomNTIM service. And then finally, we have the map sheets, NTS grids. And I think I've talked about everything else on this slide already. So this is the OGC portion. So I'll first talk about the metadata standard that we use, which is the ISO 19115. It's the North American profile. And we use the 19139, which is the XML encoding of that standard. And that is very difficult to use in practice. And we're certainly looking forward to the JSON implementation of that. I think that's part 4 of ISO 19115. I think it's currently being developed right now. So what is ISO 19115? It's how you describe the data, essentially. So it identifies the quality, spatial temporal details, who produced it, what are the data resources, what are the mapping resources. And all of this can be created on the federal geospatial platform, which is unfortunately only available for federal employees. And the FGP, we have a publication workflow, which allows us to publish to open maps directly. Okay, and on the bottom 4 standards, those are the OGC standards, and these are the ones we use. So the first one is the OWS, OGC Web Services. So the WMS, WFS, WCS, WPS, and those stands for the mapping service, feature service, coverage service, and processing services. They're all XML based. Of course, I'm sure everyone here has used one throughout their lives at some point. And it describes ways to request maps, features, coverages, those kind of things. The OGC API is a way to replace those in a way with JSON-based standards. And also there's OGC community standards. So that's the Spatial and Temporal Asset Catalog, or STAC. It extends OGC API features, and then it is used originally to share satellite imagery, but recently it's being used for non-satellite imagery. So for example, the fire danger maps, those could be a STAC catalog. And finally, what we've used on a daily basis is the CSW, which is the catalog services for the web. It's an older standard for discovering and retrieving data sets, but it is one of the core OGC standards, so part of OWS. And it's used in our division to push and pull data to other catalogs, including GEO.ca. And it has many features not currently in OGC API records. We expect those to be in future parts of the OGC API records. But right now, I think part 1 is complete. Part 2 and part 3 will have those additional features that we use. One of which is to integrate between other catalogs. Okay, so here's the diagram of our publication workflow. In red circles, I've highlighted where OGC is being used. So recall that I talked about we're ingesting all of the provincial and territorial data sets. Currently, I think Alberta is the only one using OGC CSW, similar to what we like to use. It's a variety of formats, a variety of systems that they use. CCAN is very popular. Ontario uses Drupal, but there's various, yeah. And we transform all of that into what we call HNAP, which is a harmonized North American profile. And what that does is enforces certain cardinalities of the data. So for example, it must have 0 to 4 or at least 1 stuff like that, and also enforces, most importantly, bilingualism in the metadata. So all that is transformed and stored on the cloud, and we use PyCSW to harvest from. So our internal catalog would then harvest from the PyCSW, and then we have an approval step to get onto the external catalog. The internal and external catalogs are are clones. They're just on the SCC premise. They're in physically different locations. So the external catalog is in what they call the public access zone, while the internal catalog is in the operation zone. From there, we have various push and pulls to GEO.ca, to the Open Science and Data Platform, which is one of our collaborators based in NRCan, and the Chief Science Office. Office of the Chief Scientist, sorry. And then finally, the Open Maps, which is TBS, Treasury Board Secretariat. On the bottom is the EODMS and also the CCMEO Data Cube. So EODMS is our Earth Observation Data Management System. It hosts all of our EO data sets, and the Data Cube has other value added for dissemination. For example, the NAPL photo library. Okay. This slide is from my colleagues. We're also using OGC APIs to disseminate data. This is the current process. You can see a lot of open source, a lot of OGC software being used in this diagram. PyGeo API is very popular within our department. You see GeoServer, Map Server in the near future. Those are all open source, and they're quite good, I think. All right, so the benefits of using OGC APIs. I think the main thing that has already been touched on is that they are free compared to, say, the ISO standards, which are not free. You can start working with them right away. So I'll probably read off the slide right now because it really summarizes the benefit here. So the OGC family of free API standards leverage best practices to lower the technical barrier for developers and users to increase accessibility and interoperability. And I have 5 things that I find when I use OGC API standards that are very beneficial and modern SDIs. The first is that it's stateless. So you're using HTTP requests in a standardized way. There's no, there's nothing different than you would with using other standards. And basically every single provider, be it Google or Microsoft or anyone, they're all using the same kind of HTTP requests and RESTful APIs. And also what that means is that the Swagger or the Open API page is created automatically, and it's useful to make the API understandable for humans and machines. And what that means is that, especially in the age of AI, it allows for the creation of agents, which can actually perform actions. The next is that the OGC APIs are JSON-based compared to the XML-based protocols. Of course, JSON is now the de facto standard on the web, so making it easier for web developers to use them. The next is that it's URI-based. So I have what a get features will look like in the past. So it's opaque. You have to know what exactly you're requesting. You have to know what data set you're requesting. You also need to know what feature you're requesting. So here I'm requesting the 5th element in this database using this command, get feature. If you're not a specialist, you don't know how to do that. And what OGC API has made that URI based. So for each of these, you're able to see what is in the next one, what is in the next one, what is in the next one. So in OGC API common, you'll be able to see the collection and then the item. So that's how you can explore, you can find the data that you're looking for. And as a side benefit, it allows search engines to find it as well. So using standard SEO practices, search engines will be able to index it. The fourth is the modularity of the OGC API standards. So in OGC API, there is a common standard which forms the building blocks for other OGC APIs. So the concept of collections and items, they're used across the standard and also the conformance as well. So this increased code's reusability and familiarity. And the final one is cloud nativeness of the OGC API standards. So using OGC API, we discovered like all of the formats that are cloud optimized and how beneficial they are compared to the non-cloud optimized formats. The first, of course, is the COGS or the cloud optimized GeoTIFFs. These use HTTP range requests to narrow down exactly what the user is requesting. So it brings down the amount of bandwidth needed. You can get EO data sets displayed on your screen instantaneously. There's also other formats for non-EO data sets. GeoParquet is a new one, and Flat GeoBuff is another. So those are used for features. And within them, there's different spatial structures that allow for extremely fast data sets to be retrieved in a very large database, even terabytes. Okay, and here's a diagram of how we've deployed our geospatial semantic search engine. So I'll start from maybe the left-hand side. We have our data, all the data that is on Geo.ca. It's being used in an HPC environment in Dorval. We're running fine-tuned processing, which is basically training the large language model on our data set. And then we're bringing that fine-tuned model into the AWS cloud. And we're using some of the AWS functionality there, for example, SageMaker and the OpenSearch service to do that. We have a lot of Lambda functions, which are serverless functions that form kind of the linkages between those components. And I want to show this diagram. It's not OGC specific, but it becomes part of the OGC standard at the end. So at the top, I have the diagram of our infrastructure. On our left-hand side, we're able to see the benefits of using OpenSearch. So we're able to create dashboards. This is a dashboard of our new viewer. So this is GeoView. It's very small on the screen, but you can see the number of hits, where the users are coming from, their request is in English or French, which ones are most popular, and also what standard they're using it from. So the highest we found is Esri. So Esri Dynamic, Esri Image. Those are by far the most popular, unfortunately, but not unfortunately, I would say. It's, yeah, we like to think in terms of OGC. And also on the right-hand side is OGC API records using PyGeo API and using the Elasticsearch provider. So this is the landing page of that. And when you use OGC API records, it's interoperable with other software. So here I've provided some screenshots from QGIS. So I'm actually able to import all of the data on Geo.ca, and then I'm able to see all of the metadata information, all the bounding boxes. And then here on the corner, I've actually plotted all of the bounding boxes that is available on Geo.ca. So you can kind of see where the data is coming from. So this slide is related to what we've learned using OGC standards. We've learned that OGC standards only get you so far, unfortunately. There's a lot of standards that we have to abide by. We have the WCAG 2.0, 2.1. Those are the accessibility ones, because maps, you have to have the benefit of vision. It's not going to be WCAG compliant easily. We've been in communication with the division that works with it. They've been saying that OGC API features in this context is the way to go. Maps by themselves are very difficult to make accessible for everyone. Because when you have a map, it's already produced, you're not able to change the colors easily. You're not able to get the tabular view of it. So in the case of where it needs to be read to the user, it's not able to. But for OGC API features, you're able to get that tabular format. You can style it a little bit better. We're also constrained by the Web Experience Toolkit, or the WET. This is the web experience across Government of Canada web pages. So what governs CRA, NRCan, we are all on using the Web Experience Toolkit. Finally, bilingualism. A lot of the open source projects that we've discovered that implements OGC API standards do not have bilingual built in. For PyGeo API, we actually provided the funding to add bilingualism, or multilingualism in this case. It's using a Python package called Babel, for those of you who are technical. And again, it's very easy to be overwhelmed by the number of standards you have to abide by. And the ability to publish anything onto the web is not easy. The next bullet I have is that catalogs are meant to be harvested by catalogs. I would say that a good catalog is meant to be harvested. But the problem with this is that the tragedy of the commons, of course. Everyone wants to build their own catalog. And what that means is that funding is often scarce, and that it's not sustainable. And in some ways, you always need technical people to provide the maintenance, the quality assurance, and other value added. And partnerships are more important than giving you the catalog and you harvesting for your own purposes. It's not like, there's not a mutual benefit. And the final bullet that we've discovered, and what I think is very important, is that URI-based resources, that there's a need for URI resources to always be available, have guaranteed uptime. And this goes into what Tracy said earlier about disappearance of data. So looking down south, there's a lot of information that may not be available. How do we preserve this? How do we make sure that it's available? It doesn't rely on a single source of failure. And in my view, I see the public clouds, for example, AWS, Microsoft, Azure, they're part of the solution. I see microservices being part of the solution to set and forget, Docker containers, if the microservice is too large. Yeah. So my question, I guess, for OGC API, OGC is that, is there a standard that will allow us to do this? Yeah, because when a service goes down, we're usually the first to hear about it. But the problem is we're not the owners. We can provide recommendations, but at the end of the day, all of our metadata is owned by our providers. Okay, and I'm very close to the end now. This is a slide just showing you a little bit more about what is on GEO.ca. Here on the top, we have Indigenous place names in Canada. Here we have and the next one is the flex accessibility in Canada using a swiper. We call a swiper API. So you can see the before and after. And then on the bottom, we have a dashboard for the state of mass timber in Canada. Okay. And here are our social media endpoints. You can ask. This is an example for a specific one for critical minerals. And thank you.
Hey, excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Bo. So now we're moving on to the second panel discussion that we were aiming to have today. So this is on the convergence of building information modeling, or BIM, and geospatial. So if I can ask all of the panelists who are participating in this discussion to please come up, and we'll get your panel going. Thank you.
Like Ryan to me.
Yeah. Right. Well, I guess we're ready to start then. Yeah, I guess we're towards the end of the session, but there's still quite a few people here. So I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to do the BIM GIS convergence panel. Where's next slide? Thanks. Yeah, so this is a follow-up from a session we did at the Canada Forum in Calgary, where we had a panel on the BIM GIS convergence, and it was well received. Some very interesting questions. One of the and we got some very good positive feedback. One of the things that did come out of that was a request for more practical demonstrations, what is actually happening in this space. So I figured when we came into this, the approach really should be let's get some practitioners who have some very very relevant experience in this field who can talk to us. So I'll just introduce the panel briefly. So we've got Prashant Shukuli, who's involved. He's part of the board of directors of Building Smart, also involved with the OGC as the chairman of the board. We have Dr. Farzad Jalai, who's with NRC and is involved in, well, as a research officer there, life cycle carbon. We have Andy Hogarth from Teledyne, who's going to talk a bit about some of the marine aspects. And we also have Dr. Eric Poirier, who's going to be joining us virtually. And I see him in the corner there of the screen. So hi, Eric. Thanks. So, and I'll provide a D&D data management perspective at the end, looking at how we're doing for time. So I think if we can just move to the next slide. Just got a couple of short slides just to introduce the overall topic. Basically, BIM GIS convergence. As we look at the challenges that are facing our times, climate change, all of these, I've got it all listed. All of these challenges that are facing us as a society, as a nation, as a species. We really need to be able to have the natural world and the built environment. All of those, we have to have integration of the data representing those themes. The built environment is key to this, because the development that we're doing is driving a lot of this. So we really have we really need an integrated digital built environment in order to be able to do this analysis. And this really means BIM and GIS coming together. So next slide, please. So in order to achieve an IDBE, we need data, we need processes, we need standards. So building information modeling is all about the detailed information about the built environment of buildings, and GIS is really about how we locate phenomena and this infrastructure and how we can do large scale analysis. And for these two to come together, we need standards. And we're very fortunate that there's a lot of work happening with Building Smart and the OGC to do that. I've listed some of the key ones here. There's one, it's an ISO standard, 19650, which I'll talk a bit about in my discussion with data management with D&D. That's kind of driving how all of this comes together. So, but without further ado, I think I'll move on to our practitioners here. So first of all, we have Prashant, who's going to talk to us a bit about a pan-Canadian perspective on BIM and GIS convergence. Prashant?
Thank you. I think it's really interesting and telling that there was a discussion around a national geomatic strategy or geospatial strategy, and as components of it, you have a spatial data infrastructure strategy or a strategy within a strategy. And you know, I have this image of thinking of all these Russian dolls where you keep opening something up and just another one opens up, and you're just forced to open them up, and eventually you get to the last one and there's nothing in it. So my perspective when it comes to strategies within strategies within strategies is that of somebody that has been frustrated at the federal level, having worked on a number of strategies which tend to be much more focused around process. In leaving government 6 years ago and focusing on work within the private sector, at the intersection of the private, public, and not-for-profit sector, as well as the academic sector, what's really been enlightening is the speed of change that's happening in the industry outside of government. And what is required is the need for practical projects and practical implementation, and trusting the private sector to actually deliver those kinds of projects and those kinds of activities. So if I was somebody that was asked about what kind of strategy do we want at the intersection of BIM and GIS, I would first and foremost say it's not just GIS. I would say it is GIS as well as remote sensing and other forms of data integration that have a location component or a location identifier. It could mean census data that deals with building stock. We have a census of infrastructure in this country that talks about the building techniques or building construction at Stats Canada. So we know what building types exist, the age of the buildings, so on and so forth. There's data about roads. There's data about curbs that are being built at a certain height. Now, why do I think that that's really important? Because that kind of integrated data is really about the built environment, and it's all got location identifiers that cut across a number of domains, not just GIS, not just BIM, but at the heart of everything is that it is all about spatial information, location data, and at the end of the day, it's about Canada. And so for me, it's really essential to make sure that if we are bringing together BIM data and GIS or geospatial data or space data, these are some of the largest sets of data, most complicated sets of data, and perhaps the most rigorously curated sets of data that we have as a country. I'm a big believer that you play to your best assets. And I think these are two of our best assets that are currently landlocked, kind of like LNG is landlocked, kind of like oil and gas is landlocked, and we just haven't found our way to market. So as I think of our challenge in front of us, we need to build not a spatial data infrastructure, but a sovereign data infrastructure. And the way that I would completely reframe the concept of a sovereign data infrastructure is one, focus on infrastructure first. It's about your reception capabilities coming down from the sky. It's about how it is you're collecting Internet of Things data. It's about how you're transmitting it to every household through the 5G networks. It's about the telephone towers, and it's about how it is we're going to manage spectrum in order to be communicating and doing all kinds of interesting modeling within urban environments. Secondly, you focus on the data. Why? Because A, you need the right infrastructure to make the data go. You focus on the data with all of the things everybody has said, but having clear goals and ambitions around the kind of data we want to create. Is it 3D? Is it voice enabled? Is it much more API focused? Is it no code, low code? These are real systemic challenges as opposed to some of the standard challenges that we're hearing today. And finally, view sovereignty as the outcome. If you build the other two right and build in your protections, it's all about a sovereign data infrastructure. And what I'm really happy about is thinking about how we're going to work with the National Research Council to advance this. And I think Andy, you see what I did there? I called Andy Ryan before, and I apologized to him. So I was, yeah, who's got a great project. And he'll show you about ports and how they're, how he's developing a project at the convergence of BIM, hydrospatial, as our friend Denis in the audience talks about, which is an adjacency, which is absolutely critical, and building information modeling. So with that, I'm trying to stir up the pot a little bit and get us to think about what we need as a grand challenge in this country in much more meaningful and substantive ways.
Great, thanks very much. So our next panelists will be Andy Hogarth.
Brian Hogarth.
You had me worried there for a second. But before Andy speaks, I just want to mention that we do have some interactive. We have a poll as well, a Menti poll. So after each session, there'll be 1 or 2 questions where you can just answer. So I think we have after Andy speaks, we'll have the QR code for you to see that. So over to you.
Yeah, maybe we can just move the slide on. I think I've got a slide that I'm going to help me with my speech here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Andy Hogarth. Good afternoon, everyone. I work for Teledyne Caris. We're part of Teledyne Geospatial. I run the software division out of New Brunswick. For those who've never been to New Brunswick, this is what a New Brunswick accent sounds like, loosely based on Manchester, England. But anyway, yeah, so I live in a nice part of the world, and we really specialize in developing marine GIS software, so geospatial software aimed at the marine domain. That's really our area of expertise. But I also work with our sister company in Toronto, which manufactures LiDAR systems. So when I think about marine infrastructure and I think about LiDAR data, we start to see some of the elements that allow us to model infrastructure. So yeah, interesting panel discussion about the convergence of BIM and geospatial information and geospatial software systems. And I'm a GIS guy. I'm very familiar on the GIS side of things, but BIM is something that's a bit more newer to me. And I'm learning lots as we go about this kind of multi-dimensional approach and management of information. So what I'm going to try and do in a few minutes here is to try and link marine geospatial information and BIM and how these two worlds potentially come together, which is not a trivial task. But anyway, I'm going to give it a whirl. As many of you will be aware, the marine data is managed through standards organized by the International Hydrographic Organization, the IHO. And there's a new set of standards that are evolving through the IHO, and these are the S100 standards. And I'll touch on a few of these standards to try and draw some parallels and commonality to the topic of BIM. So one of the emerging standards is S131, and apologies for the numbers and the acronyms here, but S131 is a new standard that defines marine infrastructure. So let's think about what that means. What is marine infrastructure? Think about that port. A port has got approaches that the ships sail through. There's berths, there's quay walls, there's wharfs, there's train tracks and roads and lighting poles and
container yards and sheds. A port, in fact, is really like a small town or maybe a small city for some of the larger ports. So if we think about this construct of a small town or a port, then we have to manage this infrastructure very, very well. And something that struck me recently was we saw the Heathrow Airport power failure, okay? So I remember very vividly being stuck in India trying to get back to Britain that day and couldn't. But I remember thinking, wow, when Heathrow stopped and the power went off, it was like a city losing power. So a port, an airport, like I said, it feels like a small town or a large town or a city, and therefore we have to manage that infrastructure accordingly. So if you look at the picture on the wall here, it's a bit hard to see, but top left, you'll see that key wall or that wharf in a bit more detail. This is some data from the Port of Southampton, just recorded a month ago. And what we've got is a 360-degree scanning LiDAR, which is giving us the infrastructure above the water level. And we've got a sonar tilted so that we can get the sea floor and the infrastructure below the water level. So what we've got here is a continuous point cloud that captures above and below information of that port. So really, this starts to home in on the convergence in my mind of BIM and geospatial information and GIS systems. Where I see a parallel is this type of data, these type of standards are effectively giving us a digital twin. And we've heard that terminology a lot this morning and this afternoon, perhaps overused a little bit, but regardless, as we can get this rich data and define it with standards, we start to build up a digital twin. And if we look bottom left on this screen here, we can see a digital twin of the Queen Mary, I think it's the Queen Mary 2 cruise ship. So here's a solid model, a representation with associated metadata of a cruise ship. And that cruise ship is navigating on a digital twin of the ocean floor. So this is the approaches to Vancouver, and we can see this terrain model with the safety contours. And you know, this starts to get a bit more BIM-like because here we can introduce the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension in the marine context, time or tide. So if we can understand tide, then we can start to understand when can that ship make it into port? Is there enough draft below the vessel? Is there enough water below the vessel? Is the tide going to accommodate a safe passage under a bridge? So once we start to think about the fourth dimension time as it pertains to this digital twin of the ocean, then we can start to think about how do ships sail efficiently into a port, berth at the appropriate wharf, and unload and load, because some of the biggest challenges in today's geopolitical environment, to me, seem to relate to supply chains. And as we can manage these infrastructure models and models and digital twins of the vessels and the oceans, then I think we can start to think about what are the ingredients that we need for autonomous and remote navigation in the future? How could remote berthing assist in those supply chains? And how can we get materials in and out of port effectively? So to wrap up, looking bottom right here, this is an image of the Port of Hamburg. We can see the buildings. We can see some bathymetry there in that strange rainbow color that doesn't look anything like the seabed, but we like to use that color palette. And then the chart information as well. And I think the thing that stitches these worlds together is the foundation on ISO TC211 standards. So the IHO standards have a foundation on ISO. The BIM standards have a foundation on ISO. So the good thing in our advantage is that we've got a common building point, a common foundational building block. And that means that interoperability between these S100 data types and things like building information modeling really start to align because we've got a standards framework that brings these things together. So Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much. And we have the QR code. So we'll have a couple of questions here. But just as we do that, I just want to echo what Andy was saying. In national defense, I'm part of the infrastructure and environment group. And we were briefed recently by the Navy about something called digital dockyard, where they're moving to build digital twin of a dockyard so that they manage ship models. They want to go more digital in how they manage their assets. And certainly all the marine infrastructure, all the dockyards, the jetties, and the buildings, that's going to be coming from my group. So we have to be very cognizant of how we have our data sets talk. And I suspect we're going to be learning a lot about the S series quite soon, as well as City GML and many other interchanges. So I guess our question here is, how relevant is BIM to marine standards? So we've got, I think 5. Is that how we interpret that? That's 5 responses? Oh. Okay, I see. So I guess as people answer, we get a shift. So we have, yeah, mostly, yeah. Okay, so 3.8 out of 5. So that's certainly a fairly strong relevance. So that's good. So we seem to be focused on 3.8 now. So that's great. Thanks. I guess we'll move to our next panelist, which is going to be Dr. Eric Poirier, who's very involved. He's in standards development. He's with the École Technique Supérieure in Montreal. And Eric, over to you. If you can share your screen, we'll let you present.
Right, let me check. Excellent. This works.
We see your screen.
Excellent. Fancy that works seamlessly. So good. Well, thank you for having me, and very happy to be able to participate. Sorry I couldn't be there. I'll be there on Wednesday in person, and hopefully we'll be able to meet most of you there. So just I have 10 minutes, so I will be going quite fast because there's a lot of content. I was asked to present sort of an update on what's happening internationally to support BIM GIS. I mean, we're starting with information exchange, but essentially we're talking about convergence between these two knowledge domains. I'll call them knowledge domains because they're two worlds which are converging. So rapidly, a context. I think that today in the discussion was great to put that context. I'll really fall into the efforts internationally, both at the joint Building Smart International and OGC level, as well as within Joint Working Group 14 for ISO. So rapidly, I think Andy did a great job of putting setting the table around the utility and a very tangible use case of this convergence and this increasing demand for information continuity across scales. We're really looking at driving data-driven, or supporting data-driven decision-making. And to do that, we're ranging from within our asset built environment. So when we're looking at asset management, we need to understand everything from, the equipment part down to its location, to its context, and even if we're looking at different other types of use cases around, carbon footprint and all that, where is it being sourced and where is it coming from, et cetera, et cetera. So we're seeing multiple uses for information continuity across scales. Also looking at more and more multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary approaches to built environment interventions. So we need to be able to share and evaluate and access this data across these different disciplines. We also have heightened emphasis to preserve data life cycles. So we're looking at more and more increasing data life cycles. Built assets last for decades, dozens of years, hundreds of years in certain cases. So how do we make sure that this data remain accessible and basically usable across extended life cycles? And essentially, we're looking at and driving the use of better tools and technologies. And there was discussion around AI in the first panel, of course, and everything, and digital twins also, which are all important and emerging topics. Just to say that basically BIM GIS integration have emerged in the early 2000s. Of course, GIS has a long history in geomatics, and so it's always funny. I'm an architect, trained as an architect, so come at this from the BIM perspective. And when you speak about data and data resources and all of these elements that are basically bread and butter from GIS, well, BIM is and the built asset domain is sort of trying to wrap its head around, and we're seeing a bit less perhaps maturity in terms of standards and ways of working. So there's a lot to learn from the GIS community. I'm not just saying that to pander to the crowd here, but in my workings over the past 5 years on this topic, actually 6 years now, there's a lot of things to understand from all the work that's been happening in GIS. Now, BIM, as was mentioned, has a different application domain, and it will cross multiple domains, also object-oriented modeling, where the object is key. So we're seeing, a couple of evolutions over the past 25 years. So, what's next? I think one thing is now that we're seeing more and more requirements being formulated for BIM GIS, and so how do owners request and require within their contracts that data be provided by suppliers in a functional manner that spans these scales? How do we benefit from these better data modeling and integration technologies and techniques and so forth? So basically, how do we accelerate this convergence so that we can have this seamless multi-scale data and information exchange? As I was mentioning, 3 organizations are really leading this work from a standardization perspective. So Building Smart International, the OGC, and ISO. If I start with the BSI OGC roadmap, this is was published in February 2024. It's available both on Building Smart International website and on the OGC website around enabling information continuity across BIM GIS domains. So this was the work of a panel of experts led by Jag Malela out of WSP, and basically aimed at developing a very pragmatic roadmap to really try to raise awareness and start exchanging and creating those interactions between these two knowledge domains so that we can really benefit from this collective experience. The number of sessions happened at the Building Smart International summits. Things happened in parallel at the OGC conferences. I do recall that in Singapore, the last summit, OGC meeting in Singapore, there was this roadmap was discussed. So these are parallel works, but of course, joint efforts. So since the publication and the presentation in the Building Smart International Summit in Rome in March 2024, and the Building Smart International Summit in Singapore in March 2025, so over the past year, we've really focused on use case identification and what we're calling user stories. And now we're transitioning into developing the information requirements piece. So the objectives were to identify and solve low-hanging fruit. So this is really the key here, is that this roadmap is very pragmatic, and it's really to look at how do we start solving real, problems in practice to generate value off the bat, and not that it remains a this theoretical academic exercise. Because BIM GIS has been around, and as we show in theory and in academic papers and so forth, and we've seen certain vendors, have agreements where, in a bilateral way, there's interoperability within closed systems. But, essentially the ethos behind OGC and BSI is to provide open standards and try to get this into broader practice. So it starts with identifying where can we generate value immediately, and then clearly demonstrating the benefits from that, and then building the cases as we go ahead. We essentially address three key themes: adoption and implementation within stakeholder organizations. So essentially essentially large owner organizations who have a large portfolio of built assets. So of course, Paul and D&D is a prime example of that. Largest custodian of public assets across Canada. So these are, and then of course any provincial and municipal and institutional clients as well. Also large engineering firms and anybody that has portfolios of projects are key clients or audience. Data management, modeling, integration, publication, and use. So how are things published? How are they maintained? So there was a great discussion on the governance. I think that was on point. And then, of course, tools and technology development. So there is a portion of this, which is part of BSI and OGC's remit, is around developing standards that are applicable and useful in practice and implementable by software providers. Here's the roadmap. I will not go through it, of course, no time, but it's available online, and you can see it's a 4-year roadmap with a limited number of activities, very direct. And I'll finish on this portion with saying right now we're at the use case identification stage. We've identified 5 general use cases around design analysis and visualization, a real-time project monitoring and digital twin integration, environmental impact analysis, facility operation management, and strategic and analytical decision-making for capital planning. So these 5 use cases are now being developed, and we're making them more precise with specific requirements, etc. One thing to note is that through the domain, so Building Smart International is structured around specific domains. So we do have a ports and waterways domain, for instance. We have a bridge domain, tunnel, road. We have a products domain, etc. They're being used, these domains are being leveraged or involved to actually populate and develop these use cases and the requirements, and of course, to then be able to start implementing these use cases. That's it for BSI OGC. A lot of information available online. If I switch to the ISO Joint Working Group 14, so I'm the chair for the Mirror Committee of TC 211, TC 59, and C13. Not involved in TC 211. I'll show up a map right after. But within the roadmap that I just showed, there's a heavy reliance on standards. So you can see that there's a connection between BSI, OGC, and the ISO work. And the idea here is to be able to make sure that the right people are doing the right things, or establishing the right, or in the right chair. And ISO has, its remit is to support the foundational elements upon which, then these more practical, more technical standards can be developed. So just rapidly, the Canadian standards landscape here. So the work is happening within Joint Working Group 14. As you can see, it's a joint working group between 2C59 and C13, the BIM, and the TC211, the GIS. This was stood up in 2019. And as you see, there's liaisons between these technical committees, subcommittees, and Building Smart International and OGC. And there's an MOU between BSI and OGC. And we have a chapter in Canada, which is Building Smart Canada, and we have a mirror committee. So, everything is connected, and the idea here is to make sure that that work stays connected and is supported and coherent between them. So I'm a bit over time. I will go quickly around here just to basically raise awareness around the resources that have been published. First technical report was published in 2021 that outlined basically the needs for interoperability between BIM and GIS. So it lists 14 incompatibilities, anything around service interoperability, data interoperability, looking at conceptual and technological barriers. So examples such as semantic incompatibility between concepts of service, products, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a great technical report. It goes into depth around the core differences between BIM and GIS knowledge domains, namely around the types of data schemas and models that are available in each domain. From there, from that report, 3 work packages were identified. Well, many opportunities were identified, but 3 work items are proposed. As you see them here, geospatial and BIM review of vocabularies, linking abstract concepts in BIM and GIS, and information exchange guidelines between BIM and GIS. One other thing is also we highlight the fact that there's significant amounts of standards that exist. And so the key element and the biggest challenge is to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel as we move in this space to leverage these existing standards. So rapidly, the geospatial and BIM review of vocabularies, it's a methodological and very rigorous approach to looking at core concepts across structures and architectures, digital representation, digital documentation, uses, functions, and services, and looking at terminology between the BIM and the GIS domain and see what are identical and terminologies, what are terms that are used in the same way, what are terms that are similar but aren't used in the same way, etc. So really just to start working on that semantic interoperability between the both domains. And the other part of the work that I'm more involved with, I'm leading part 1 of this, is ISO 24134. Paul's involved, as well as a number of other international experts. So this is a 5-part standard that's supporting BIM and GIS information exchange. Part 1 is around core principles and specifications. Part 2 is around data exchange through metadata. Part 3 is around linking abstract concepts in BIM and GIS. And part 4 is around geometric representation. Part 5, which is forthcoming, is around quality control, quality assurance. But as you can see, we're unpacking these concepts and trying to establish common ways of working to enhance that repeatability, that robustness, making sure that now that that public owners and large owners are requiring the information and data in digital format, that regardless if it's in the GIS space or in the BIM space, that they can get that information in a consistent and clear manner. So of course, part 1 covers georeferencing, which is a key component here. Just in terms of, this is my last slide, we're looking at publication around 2026, end of 2026, 2027 for all 4 parts. As you can see here, how they relate to the BIM and GIS space. And that's it. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. And I'm sorry that I did go a bit over time, but there's a lot of stuff going on, so important to share.
Great. Thanks very much, Eric. It was really interesting. Yeah, and we have a couple of questions on that. And just while we wait for people to answer, the different terms from those different worlds, that was demonstrated to me firsthand. We had two employees who almost came to blows because of misinterpretation. One was a GIS background, one had a BIM background. They were talking about metadata, and they were actually in total agreement, but they didn't realize it, and it was getting pretty heated. So.
Yeah, you don't want people getting into fights over BIM and GIS.
Exactly.
It's never a good thing.
Okay, so the question, I guess, is what is needed to better enable BIM and open BIM data standards? So I guess this is a word cloud, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know if there's anyone who has any inputs they want to do. Let's give people a few moments. Okay, collaboration fund. There we go. Geospatial and visual GIS. That's good. I guess we're recording all this, so we can go back to it. Yeah, collaboration key. So it's
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if I can,
upskilling.
you know, the collaboration between BSI, OGC, and ISO is I think a very interesting one where, you know, there's a clear demarcation of who's doing what and who's responsible for what. And the joint initiative by BSI and OGC is recognizing the fact that you have to span domains, you have to be able to you know, reach out and work together. They recognize the need and really drive value, really speak to that, to develop tools that will, you know, be useful rapidly to the industry. And ISO can take a bit more time. It is a lengthier process. It does, you know, it's systematic in that it has to go through multiple phases of review. So recognizing these different time scales where, you know, an organization like BSI and OGC can work really boots on the ground and get stuff out the door rapidly and iterate, whereas ISO, things take a bit longer, then it helps a lot in establishing, you know, the roles and responsibilities and expectations around who's supposed to do what.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So I think we're ready for our next presenter. Thanks, Eric. And we have Farzad, Dr. Farzad Jalali from NRC.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. Farzad from NRC. I'm probably the last one joined to this panel. I'm not a GIS expert, but I'm coming from the BIM perspective, Open BIM, and also like we are actually started, like it's been 2 years that we started the national platform at NRC to decarbonize construction sector at scale. And this platform is going to stay for next 7 years until 2030. And the main like aspect of this is to kind of like do R&D works as the federal, the R&D arm of the federal government in terms of helping to get to those limits and targets that is promised by the federal government in terms of reducing the GHG by 2030, making the codes from prescriptive version to mainly capture the performance language in it, and also helping in terms of advancing the construction processes and adopting the emerging technologies like digitalization, BIM, open standards, and also like GIS is one of those aspects. If I can have, yeah, this is probably, we have started with this kind of document to highlight the roadmap for research and development practices that we are currently doing at NRC. Different aspects, 10 main streams at R&D level are identified. From circular economy to the life cycle environmental impact assessment and cost analysis, all the way to the digitalization of the codes and specifications, moving toward the code compliance checks, e-permitting solutions, and as also like mentioned, this data management and digital twinning is also in the scope of our R&D roadmap to conduct different projects. And those items on top are kind of like a master projects. We are trying to either like build the foundation to create and help and collaborate with the standards organization, Building Smart OGC, in terms of bringing in the regional references, like the last activity we have done, probably Eric mentioned, like about bringing in the ISO 19650 adoption in Canada, that is like recently published by Canada Standard Association and Standard Council of Canada. We are also we have over 400 researchers internally. So we are helping in terms of building some solutions, open source solutions, like the Open BIM aspect that I'm going to present in the next slides. And demonstration projects, kind of like showing the valorization aspect of adopting the Open BIM, GIS, and the other technologies in some use cases, and amplifying the business value and the productivity importance and productivity improvement that we can capture out of those demonstration projects. The sustainability aspect is the first one that we have touched on, that kind of like looking into how we can use and adopt the open standards in terms of capturing the embodied and operational carbon at the whole asset level and the infrastructure. The next slide, please. This is another document that we collaborated with the Building Smart, and the infographic that's similar to the one that you are seeing that is about to be built. We presented the Open BIM for decarbonization in the Building Smart International Summit in Valencia. We kind of like explored all those success stories that has happened in terms of adopting Open BIM in different countries, in different chapters of Building Smart International, and the kind of like providing the statistical information on how ready the Canadian construction industry in adopting the Open BIM from different angles, from government force, from technological perspective, from having the regional references in Canada, and from like its importance in terms of like moving toward the sustainability aspect. The next slide. So the first project that we have started collaborating with the academic institutions and the industry partners are in terms of how we can use the Open BIM standard, the universal language of conducting design and operational aspect using the open standards. So the IFC that you probably heard of, this platform that is, it's been like 2 decades with Building Smart International, is one of the key data exchange format that we captured, how we can work with this IFC, providing non-proprietary type solution in terms of doing the sanity check on the received IFC, making sure that it has the minimum data requirements by defining the information delivery specification. And after verifying the received IFC file from the BIM, so we are doing some kind of like a mapping with what we have as the inventory data set related to the carbon, either embodied carbon in different aspects of the life cycle, plus the operational carbon for capturing the energy simulation results from the whole asset, and moving it towards reporting the carbon for the whole asset and returning it back. So that's the important part, because we kind of try to create this bi-directional communication between the Open BIM and the carbon stuff in terms of visualizing the carbon reporting on the IFC file as well. So the next item is where I kind of like the first touch on the need or demand of GIS data is on those items, probably that's very small, but those items related to the transportation activities. We have so many transportation related activities that we need to capture the carbon out of it. The transportation, when you are doing the contribution analysis on the whole life cycle of the asset, around like 15% of the carbon comes from the transportation related activities. For transportation activities, we need to get access to the geographical data. Normally, what they conventionally do on capturing the carbon, they are making so many assumptions in terms of, okay, we are like considering the vendors living in the circle of like 100 kilometers of the construction site, or like these kind of like a non-accurate type assumptions that we are always witnessing when we are conducting the life cycle environmental impact assessment. So the like in terms of getting into the right type of calculation, the importance of having access to the geographic location of the vendors, geographic location of where you are removing the waste and transporting the waste out of the construction site, specifically at the end of life stage of the asset. And also even at the operational stage, it has some like indirect impact of having access to the geographic data for energy simulation, connecting it to the zone, to the climate type data when you are running the energy simulation. And also when you are kind of like having a right procurement plan in terms of the scheduling of the vendors, in terms of providing the materials on site, or you know, like removing the risk of creating the waste at the construction site by better planning of the procurement of the materials and products on site. So these are all the demand of getting access to the geographic data. The next slide is the platform that we are kind of like a built-in house. It's kind of like a web-based application that is about to get completed. We are kind of like doing some tests on debugging some stuff. We are, as I mentioned, like we are adopting the IFC. We are receiving the IFC. We are kind of like doing the verification check on those IFC files, visualizing it. So one important aspect is that like through this platform, we are trying to do some step-by-step data aggregation to get to the carbon number. And one important part is that like we are trying to get access to the environmental product declaration of the materials and products. And in that case, even if like EPD document can get access to the geographic data, the location of the manufacturers and vendors, somehow like inherited into that type of like EPD files, that would make our life much easier in terms of like easily getting that connected and integrated into our process, and not a you know, like make this process so long in terms of doing step-by-step data aggregation to get to the carbon number. Right here, this is kind of like one sample of getting access to the A1 to A3 data from EPD document, the PDF that system can look at it. Here we are using the Google Map engine in terms of just like doing rough estimation about the location of the vendor and the construction site. Here is where I was mentioning about the transportation related activity that in terms of getting access to the GIS data, that would make much like accurate process in terms of capturing the transportation related activity. I don't want to just stay with the whole process of showing, like maybe the next slide is where I can show the one of those use cases. Like this is NRC campus, we are trying to kind of like move from IFC to CTGML and kind of like locating different assets in one place and kind of like evaluate and assess the carbon performance of those buildings and visualizing it through this kind of, like a color coding feature in terms of identifying what each, how's each asset operating from embodied and operational carbon. And this is kind of like the way, one way probably, of standardizing the whole process. And this gives us, like one of the big challenges that we are facing right now is that when you are getting into the carbon number, based on what benchmarking, based on what reference you are comparing your result. And what is the benchmark number in Canada? We don't have it still, because we don't have the standardized way of getting to the benchmarking numbers. Like there are so many like reports, Carbon Leadership Forum, they are like producing some numbers in terms of benchmarking embodied and operational carbon for specific archetypes in Canada, but still it's not consistent. Some like a data collection, data processing, using specific tools, like connecting it to the right carbon data. Again, this transportation related activity, which is not consistent in Canada based on different studies that we witnessed through our doing the state of art, literature reviews that we have done. So this is one way that we witness that has the more productivity perspective and getting us into the standard way of reaching out to the benchmarking numbers. So that's probably what I have. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Bressa. Okay, I guess we have a question here. I think this is a word cloud as well. So just wait a few moments while that comes through. And I think some of the discussions we saw in the previous panel about the changes that we need on our spatial data infrastructure, I think that's really key. Certainly for evaluating life cycle carbon, you need to be able to tie into a national spatial infrastructure, and indeed even international. Just a couple of weeks ago in National Defense, we had a presentation from NRC, full government thing, talking a bit about impact of carbon, and some things like the effects of a ton of steel in a building in Canada can have 5 tons of tailings in the Amazon. So we have to track this, and we need these national, international spatial data infrastructures to do it. So I think we see some results coming through here. So schema matching, data gaps. Yeah, these are all key things. I realize we are getting short on time, so when I'll do I have a few things to say a bit about this, but I'll go through my presentation fairly quickly. So education, and upskilling, that's something that we're experiencing in national defense. Certainly as we move to more advanced model deliverables, we need we need our workforce to be upskilled to be able to handle it. So okay, I think we have a static result there. So I guess we'll move on to the next one, which is me. And like I said, I won't take too long because I do want to move on to Graham's presentation. So I'm with the Department of National Defense in the Infrastructure and the Real Property Infrastructure Environment Group. So can you have the next slide? Thanks. So basically in National Defense, we Infrastructure and Environment Group, we manage the real property portfolio. And we're, in terms of the portfolio, we're the largest public owner in Canada. About 22,000 buildings, and all the civil works to keep them going. Many of these are mission critical infrastructure, like runways, docks. These are key to the defense of Canada. So I guess two takeaways from this. One is that we've only just recently, 2016 seems recent, and previous to that, the management of all this infrastructure was done by 9 different organizations. So we've kind of come together to do it under one organization, which certainly makes a lot of sense. But when you bring all these different groups, disparate methods, different software tools, different data sets and files together, it does take a while to get it all working. So that's one key thing. The other key thing is that we're a large owner organization, but we rely on industry to deliver our projects, and indeed even in some cases to run the assets as well. So we own the requirements for our projects, but it's industry that do that. So the result is that you have a lot of information and data that's flowing, and we need to manage that. So next question. Next slide. Thanks. So when we talk about CAD BIM convergence, we often think of ArcGIS, reading Revit models and IFC and all that, and that's certainly very important. What I want to focus on is more the overall data flow, because if your data flows if you're not managing your data effectively, then those Revit files aren't going to be as good as they could be, or maybe you're reading them into a geospatial context that isn't right. So you have to manage the data flow. So one thing that we're doing in national defense, and this is really kind of where we see a lot of our convergence, because we're embracing something called ISO 19650, which is an ISO standard that governs the management of data for building assets and locational assets, the civil engineering. So it really defines the information handovers, the data flows right from the project into the asset management. So it's basically the full gamut of your asset life cycle. So by embracing this, we're really kind of looking to manage our data better. So we have so what I'm showing here is a diagram that's kind of showing our current iteration of where we want to go. We're kind of modifying this diagram every so often, but we do have our core data lake that we've established inside our network. We are now moving more to a defense cloud, so we're doing more things with in the Azure cloud. We have basically our data exchanges, common data environments, all of our information handovers that support the BIM and project delivery. And the thing to remember is that with 22,000 assets, we have a lot of projects going on. So it's the large capital projects, but there's something similar happening at a more local level. And it's still the same process. So there's a lot of information that we have to manage. We've had cases where the information delivered from a project goes right to a local detachment. So you may have someone who hasn't been upskilled, doesn't know how to use these modern tools, and suddenly has a BIM model of a newly delivered asset, and they just don't know what to do with it. And we have core some of our core data sets, like our ERP that handles all the the master business data. We have information that's flowing from BIM that has to go in there. So we've got to make sure that all this is happening. So there's things like you have to define the asset information model, the project information models, exchange information requirements, these EIRs, and really kind of move to be a bit more digital in how we're doing things. So we're working with our local detachments. We're working with our engineers and our architects to get them comfortable with this. We have a document submission standard that we're modernizing. It's really an EIR, but it's not called that. It's exchange information requirements. So we're looking to make that more model based. And we're really, moving to be more digital in what we do. Core need for standards. in some of the projects that we're supporting, for example, we're actually involved with SIMS through NRC, and we did some work with them where we delivered data to support digital twin. And on the geo side, it didn't go so well because frankly, we weren't embracing standards. We did something fairly traditional in the GIS world. We had our core, file database that for a site, turned it over. We know our data. I think there's something James talked about in the previous panel. You know your data, but others don't. And no matter how many PDFs or spreadsheets, it's not the same. So you need those defined exchange formats. So something like IFC work well, City GML, that's something that we need to be a lot more cognizant of. So yeah, thanks. I think our previous panels and our panelists here have talked about a lot of these points. We really are at an inflection point in digitalization. Some of the key things I've outlined: maturation of Building Smart Canada. There's a lot of interesting things happening there, driving the adoption of standards here in Canada. The OGC. I'm very fortunate in that National Defence is a voting member with OGC, and I have had a lot of opportunities to see what's happening in that world. It's quite eye-opening how other countries are embracing these, and we can learn a lot. One last slide here. Yeah, this basically what I wanted to say with this slide is that National Defence, we're very interested in working with others, other government, with industry, with standards organizations. Our core mission is the defense of Canada, but to do that, we need an effective real property portfolio, and to manage that, we need the modernization, digitalization of the construction sector. We need standards adopted in government and in industry. So to do that, we need to work with a lot of different partners. Our management told us to lead from the middle, and kind of had to scratch our head a bit to work out what that was. But we took that to mean we need to collaborate with as many people as we can. So that's kind of what we're doing with OGC, Building Smart, and many others. So that's pretty much what, yeah, that's the end of my piece here. So we do have a couple of questions just as we wrap up. So what can be done to improve BIM and GIS interoperability? And again, I think this is a word cloud. So we'll just see if there's anyone still inputting right now. Guess maybe everyone's thinking. So maybe just give a few more moments, then maybe we can move to the next one. I think the next one is a sliding scale, so it might be a bit easier. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so I don't think we have anyone biting on. Oh, here we are. Okay, so took a while for things to update. So education, yeah, collaboration, obviously always collaboration. Understanding, knowledge exchange, yeah, collaboration too, coordination. Yeah, so this is all interaction between groups and organizations. This is all good stuff. So. And one last question here. Basically, how aware were you of the activities that we've talked about in this panel before the session? So just give a few minutes or moments for people to respond. Okay. So we seem to be stabilizing here about 2.7. So it's about halfway. So I guess some people were aware, some weren't. So that's good. Okay, great. And just as we wrap up, we had, this is where we solicit feedback. If there's any questions from the audience. We had one question here, which I think was our initial edit of the question, Prashant. This is, what needs to happen to enable Canadian standards-based procurement strategies? Do you have anything you wanted to elaborate on that?
Well, I think, I think, with all due respect to my colleagues that are still in government and have the patience that I couldn't have with all of the extra processes that are in place, it may be an opportunity if there is procurement reform, as the new Prime Minister has said, that instead of looking at reforming existing processes, is look at a design-centric perspective that has the citizen at the focus of the new procurement process. And when I say citizen, I mean the citizen as the receiver of the public good, but also thinking about the process in which the deliverer of the public good is an entity that is hopefully of Canadian, significant Canadian provenance. I think we have to be much more aware in terms of our data. And as you, if I can go back to my fundamental concept of our infrastructure, you know, the stuff, the 5G, the 6G, all of the work that we do with our ground stations, all of the things that we do with our sensors and where we store our data about our buildings, as well as our how humans interact with our buildings, really have to be sovereign. And I do think that we have to be much more aware that our data is not subject to the Patriot Act. You guys remember Peter this morning talked about the Place, about Place Foundation and their model of a public trust. I sit on that board of directors as well. We chose the UK as the place where we were going to put the data trust because the UK's got the best legislation in the world to protect citizen data. We can do that here in Canada, but we've got to stop the processes that we currently have in play around designing for existing players that are overwhelming us in government. So it's a tall order. And I think design centric with the citizen at the end, but very close is the public good delivery by the private sector. And please, government, do not build internally. That is the most unproductive thing we can do because it's slow. Procurement processes are not just slow. You're not going to get the level of reinvestment that's required. And you just don't have the financial capacity that the private sector can raise either through VCs or through global funding opportunities, whether it's the Horizons program, whether it's through Business Smart International or other ways in which we can complement the funding you can get us.
Thanks very much, Prashant. So are there any questions from the audience? I don't see anyone. I think we're starting to get on. And oh, sorry, we do have a question there.
I missed the last part of your, I got everything except the last little bit. Essentially, sure, the citizen can, if you're thinking of integrative design, or if you're thinking about a particular design model, some of them have the citizen at the center and then you build all the processes around it. Others could be, you know, the citizen's the one that fundamentally receives the outcome of good processes. So either or, I don't mean it to be prescriptive as, you know, they've got to be at the end of a linear process or at the center of a circular process. I think we mean the same thing, but our mental models are probably a little bit different. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Thanks. Okay, I guess we're just done. But before I dismiss the panel, I do have one thing to present. Appreciation for our panelists here. Each panelist is getting a set of, no. It's actually a set of coasters. So just before you're wondering kind of what an odd thing to present, there is a GEO tie-in. These are coasters that have the fire insurance maps of Ottawa from the 1880s kind of lithographed on them. So it's they're kind of interesting pieces to look at. And they're also sourced locally, just up the valley in Renfrew. So so keeping with our themes of geo, yeah, geo integration and locally sourced. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Paul, and panelists for that excellent set of presentation and discussion. And I think the panelists from the first panel are going to be jealous that they didn't participate in this one because they didn't receive the gift. So thank you for that. So we'll move on now to our last presentation of the day. So my colleague Graham Wilkes, also from Natural Resources Canada, is going to give a short presentation about the ISO TC or Technical Committee 211 Mirror Committee and how you can get involved in that. So Graham.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Graham Wilkes. I'm from the Canada Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation at Natural Resources Canada, where we work on the Canadian geospatial data infrastructure. I must say the BIM and GIS convergence panel was great. Today, I'm here representing my colleague, Alianne Hack from NRCan. And his current leadership on this topic. He could not be here today. I would like to take a minute to update you on the important work Canada is doing for international standards development in ISO. As we all know, the International Organization for Standardization, but some of you may not know the acronym we throw around so much. And the previous panel in BIM and GIS, they have experts who are bridging these gaps between communities and ISO, making this a perfect segue into this topic. OGC and ISO, they collaborate very closely. They coordinate, avoid duplication, and align standards between the organizations, benefiting the geospatial industry as a whole. Many people involved in OGC are also involved in ISO, where they wear two hats, one for each organization. ISO divides their topics into committees, and the geomatics one is Technical Committee 211. ISO likes its numbers. TC 211 standards are often conceptual models, while OGC offers the practical implementations, although there are exceptions to these rules. The conceptual models are important to shape the implementation, where they provide value as a blueprint, essentially, for the implementation process. Internationally, many countries are involved in standards development. Some, like Canada, take a participatory role, while others observe through national standards bodies. The Standards Council of Canada sanctions our involvement in ISO. The Mirror Committee is Canada's voice in TC 211. It coordinates with the Standards Council of Canada, Canada's national standards body. We are always actively looking for new members for participation. Whether you want to simply observe or actively contribute to the geospatial standards development process, the opportunity is there for you to participate. And so you may be asking these questions right now on how I can get more involved. And this is one actionable outcome you could follow if you're interested. We are keen to involve individuals from the private sector and especially academia for more balanced representation. By joining the Mirror Committee, you gain access to TC 211 and its related activities, the standards that are being developed, and you can attend to the meetings, observe, and as well, if you want to be more actively involved, you can help vote on whether the standards are approved or not. So you can actually participate in the standards development process and impact what is being developed for our future. As a member, you gain first and free access to those draft standards. So it's an opportunity to access there as well. Participation is free. And by getting involved, you, as I mentioned, gain access to the standards, but as well, a group of international experts. So it's a good networking opportunity as well. Additionally, the Standards Council of Canada has previously provided partial funding for select individuals to participate, those that are non-governmental employees, to attend international meetings to help represent Canada there. My last slide on that note, if anyone here online or in person is interested in participating, please feel free to reach out to myself or Alian Hack, his email is there. You can scan this QR code as well on this slide, or there is an information page I've left at the back of the room to add yourself on for an interest list. And we will follow up with you and arrange a meeting to discuss how you could be more involved in standards development. So I thank you. I wish you a wonderful rest of the day and evening. Thank you for OGC and everyone, the panelists who organized and participated in this wonderful event. It was a pleasure to meet with you, and I hope to see you all very soon. Again, very soon, I meant. Thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you. Thanks, Graham. Yeah, I think we're at 4:30, so we'll have to stop the questions, but thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So I'm just here to close the session quickly. So thank you everyone for participating and holding on through us for about over 3 hours. So it was a very long session, but I think we certainly learned a lot, and we covered a lot of very interesting ground today. So ranging from the more of the technical elements of participating in the Mirror Committee, looking at BIM and GIS convergence and what that would look like. And how that connects to more high-level priorities that we saw early in the session around creating like a pan-Canadian geospatial strategy. And I think one thing thread that I think most of us would agree runs through all of these is the need for further collaboration and coordination, which happens through forums like this, as Peter mentioned at the very start of our presentation or our session today. So we'll certainly aim to bring more Canada Forum sessions forward so that we can continue conversations like this over time. So with that, I'll close the session and just thank everyone for participating. I want to thank all of the co-chairs for the Canada Forum for helping to bring this together. Certainly OGC and GeoIgnite for giving us the venue and helping to support us through this. And specifically, I'd like to recognize Rosie Chen from OGC, who did a huge amount of work organizing all of this. So thank you very much for this. So thank you all for participating, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week here at GeoIgnite. Thank you.